we are live.
Hello and welcome all to the August 5th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. If we can have a roll call, please.
Chair Gutierrez,
Here,
Vice Chair Hogan,
excused.
Commissioner Clow,
Present.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Here.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Here.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Setenia.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quorum is present.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Faulkner, if you'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioner Faulkner. Approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Chair, no changes from staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any changes from the commission?
Motion to approve, Commissioner Faulkner.
Second, Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you. We can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Setenia.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of minutes, the July 1st, 2021. Any changes from staff?
Thank you, Chair. No changes from staff.
Any changes from the commission?
Commissioner Faulkner to approve.
Commissioner Klaus seconds.
Thank you. If we can get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Setenia.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have no old business, so we will move on to the new business. And the first item on the agenda for new business is the Policy Subcommittee recommendations for cannabis legislation.
Chair, sorry to interrupt you, Chair. We have approval of the minutes from July 1st,
Oh.
2021.
Okay. The minutes we just did.
Did we do the minutes? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Faulkner, if you'd like to start with this.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we were all a little surprised we were handed cannabis in the not so timely manner we were handed it. But I just wanted, before staff goes into our recommendations, I just wanted to thank staff as well as my fellow committee members. I think everybody put in a lot of extra time and did a lot of hard work. And I think for what the timeline we were given, I think we've put together something that's workable. And again, I just want to thank Sally and Noah for everything they've done and the other commissioners as well on the subcommittee. We all worked very, very hard and put a lot of effort into it. So I thought what we would do is have Noah go over the memo, which basically is our recommendations, and then we could go into the discussion, if that works, Mr. Chair.
That's fine. Mr. Burke, if you want to present the memo.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner and the Policy Subcommittee for diligently working through this very tight timeline that we've been tasked with. And it's been a lot of hard work, as Commissioner Faulkner had alluded to. So in 2021, at the special session, the New Mexico legislature adopted this Regulation Act, which is known as House Bill number 2. This legalized cannabis use for adults 21 years and older. The act, which took effect on June 29, 2021, allows local jurisdictions to adopt zoning land use regulations, but limits the extent of local regulatory authority. In the memo that I set forth was the recommendations from the Policy Subcommittee. I trust that everybody was able to read that, and apologize again for the tight timeline that we've been tasked with, but we wanted to make sure that it was in a good working form. The state basically has clearly outlined what we can and cannot do. And what the jurisdictions, what we cannot do, meaning us as a city and as the Planning Commission, as the governing body, what we cannot do is we cannot prevent anyone properly licensed from transporting cannabis products on public roads. We can't completely prohibit the operation of a cannabis licensee, prohibit or limit signage identifying businesses as cannabis establishments if it's attached to or located on the business premise, require a cannabis establishment or a cannabis consumption area to be located more than 300 feet from a school or daycare center that existed prior to the cannabis establishment or the consumption area that was licensed. We cannot require an existing cannabis licensee to relocate on a new premise, or we cannot prohibit an adult New Mexican from producing homegrown cannabis. In fact, homegrown cannabis, you're limited to 6 individual plants per person or a total of 12 plants per household. But what we can do is local jurisdictions can reasonably adopt and limit conditions like density of cannabis establishments, operating times, and also the location of cannabis establishments. So over the last several weeks, the Policy Subcommittee has conducted several meetings, and we basically, or the Policy Subcommittee basically was addressing what was discussed at the July 14, 2021 governing body. And at that meeting of the governing body, there was a memo that was created and presented to the governing body around the Cannabis Control Act, and also about what we're able to do right now as a city, and what the land use department is doing with respect to medicinal marijuana, and also what we would do if we weren't able to adopt regulations. And right now, there's, as the ordinances sit today and as the regulations sit today, we can easily, if there's a production of cannabis growing operations, and it's using hydroponics today as it exists in our code, in the districts that it's allowed, which are some commercial districts and industrial districts, it requires a special use permit that goes to the Board of Adjustment. That's just with the regulations as they are right now. We don't have a definition for cannabis consumption area, so we're not addressing that at this point in time. In fact, on January 1st, that will be the timeline when regulation and licensing and the Cannabis Control Division is actually able to start accepting applications for retail establishments, cannabis retail establishments, and cannabis consumption areas. But the state is still working on the framework for those areas. So right now, what we're tasked with is to address the recommendations that were put forth by staff to the governing body. And the Policy Subcommittee has addressed these. I'm going to go through each one of them. So the first one that we're going to go ahead and speak to is, the first one was, should the density of cannabis establishments be limited in all or part of the city? The Policy Subcommittee said yes to this. The Policy Subcommittee recommended that the adoption of a minimum distance between commercial retail establishments as measured from the property lines of a parcel to avoid the potential negative consequences that might result from concentrating retail establishments, and also recommends a uniform minimum distance across the city to promote equitable requirements in all areas of the town and ease of enforcement. Staff has provided maps that illustrate, which we'll share screens in a moment, that illustrate buffer zones in various sizes ranging from 100 to 600 feet. The Policy Subcommittee anticipates making a recommendation for a buffer of between 300 and 600 feet following input from the public and the full Planning Commission. The Policy Subcommittee is also exploring whether density limitations might be appropriate for other types of cannabis establishments, including production, growing, and manufacturing establishments. The Policy Subcommittee recommends that uniform density be throughout the entire city, meaning that no district shall be at a higher or lesser density than any other district. Consistency in regards to density is a critical part of the intent of the New Mexico state law to ensuring equity. So that was the first question that the Policy Subcommittee answered. The second one was, should the city adopt operating times for cannabis establishments? The answer to this, the Policy Subcommittee felt, is yes. In fact, the Policy Subcommittee studied other ordinances, including Santa Fe County, who just passed on Friday their cannabis ordinances and regulations for cannabis growing in the county. which is not as complex as the city. We have much more commercial zoning districts. We have more industrial zoning districts. We're a city, we're not a county, right? Well, we're part of a county, but we're a city and an urban area. So the Policy Committee recommended limiting commercial retail establishments to operating hours of 7 a.m. to 12 a.m. midnight. And this would be consistent with what Santa Fe County has adopted. So that was how the Policy Subcommittee recommended for that. The next question that the Policy Subcommittee was tasked to answer was, should cannabis uses be located a minimum distance from schools, daycare centers, religious institutions, and/or residential neighborhoods? The Policy Subcommittee felt that we should not be located a minimum distance from religious institutions, but in general, yes, cannabis establishments should be located no closer than 300 feet from a school or daycare center. They do not recommend a minimum distance from religious institutions or residentially zoned districts, and this is talking in the light of cannabis in general. The Policy Subcommittee notes that existing provisions in Chapter 14, which are already in place now, require up to an 8-foot wall and a 15-foot landscape buffer in areas where there's a non-residential activity abutting a residential activity or residential zone. So those are already controls that are already placed in Chapter 14, and the Policy Subcommittee felt that these were adequate, that we didn't need to increase these at all. They appear to address the concerns about noise and odor with these buffers and these restrictions. And to further protect residential neighborhoods, the Policy Subcommittee also recommends prohibiting home occupations of cannabis, commercial cannabis that involve, which would be consistent with Santa Fe County, because they are not allowing home occupations of commercial cannabis activities. The next question was, should a special use permit be required to operate a cannabis establishment in certain areas? And overwhelmingly, we said yes. At a minimum, the Policy Subcommittee recommends that a special use permit should be required for all outdoor commercial growing operations, all large growing operations, which are 22,000 square feet of canopy or more, and all growing operations in C2 and BIP districts. And primarily that had to do with, there's not a lot of BIP districts in the city, and they do allow for more uses than, let's say, just industrial. And also C2 is our most advantageous zoning district, which now has developed more into both residential and commercial. So we don't have as much C2, and it also allows for the most uses in the city. So those would require special use permits. Next question that was addressed was, should the city adopt regulations to allow recreational cannabis consumption areas? So the answer was yes to this, but not as part of this initial legislation that we're currently reviewing today. The Policy Subcommittee recommends that consumption areas should be prohibited until the city has had an opportunity to conduct further study and obtain additional input from the community and stakeholders. The state of New Mexico has not drafted regulations for consumption areas, and therefore the Policy Subcommittee is not in a position to offer guidance until such regulations are promulgated at the state level. The Policy Subcommittee anticipates that additional legislation on this topic will be drafted and proposed in the near future. So this will be in the coming months. The September 1st is really for deadline that everybody's speaking about, is really for production. So that was kind of what the Policy Subcommittee was most focused on with this pressing timeline. The next question was, should the table of permitted uses be revised to clarify or amend the zoning districts in which the various types of cannabis establishments may be located? For example, should certain zoning districts be reserved for uses other than cannabis establishments to prevent unintended consequences, such as the proliferation of cannabis establishments, which could drive other businesses out or cause rent and property prices to go up? The subcommittee said yes. For clarity, the Policy Subcommittee recommends that various types of cannabis establishments should be added to the table of permitted uses. The Policy Subcommittee recommends basing the permitted zoning districts on existing categories, which with the following recommended changes. Retail cannabis should be allowed in zones where other retail is allowed, subject to the density, which we haven't decided yet, and proximity to schools and daycares, which are no more than 300 feet, limitations, which we have described. Permitted districts include C2, BCD, industrial districts, shopping center districts, and mixed use districts, as well as some industrial districts. Cannabis manufacturing uses should be divided into two categories. Methods of manufacturing that involve volatile solvents pose a greater risk to the public safety should be restricted to industrial zoning districts. Research and testing laboratories that use volatile solvents should likewise be treated as heavy manufacturing. Methods of manufacturing that pose a lower risk to public safety should be allowed in the zoning districts that currently allow laboratory, light manufacturing, and assembly uses, which include C2, BCD, and industrial zoning districts. Now, regarding cannabis production, this is where we really, the policy subcommittee really got into the details of this, which is very, very important. And there was a lot of good work done on this. Cannabis production growing, the policy subcommittee notes that the facility size appears to be critical to managing this industry in other cities and states, and that the other jurisdictions have regulated facility size based on a calculation of the total area of the canopy of mature plants present at the facility at any one time. The policy subcommittee recommends an ongoing study of this issue and intends to retain this as a policy priority in the near future. At this time, the policy subcommittee recommends 5 different categories of producers and requiring special use permits for the most growing operations as follows. So I'm going to go through each of these different production levels. So the first one, and keep in mind, these are in line with what the state has already established. And the policy subcommittee went into further detail for our jurisdiction. So there's the cannabis producer micro business, which is up to 200 mature plants. That would be permitted indoors in I1 and I2 districts, permitted indoors or outdoors with a special use permit in C4 and BIP districts. The next level is a cannabis producer extra small, which is up to a 2,500 square foot canopy. It's recommended that this would be permitted indoors in an I1, I2 district, permitted indoors or outdoors with a special use permit in the C4 and BIP district. The next level is cannabis producer small, which is 2,500 to 10,000 square feet canopy. This would be permitted also in an I1 and I2, and it would be permitted indoors or outdoors with a special use permit, again, in a C4 and a BIP district. Cannabis producer medium is a 10,000 to 22,000 square foot canopy indoors or up to 1 acre outdoors. This would be permitted indoors in an I1, I2 district, permitted indoors or outdoors with a special use permit in a C4 and a BIP district. And then our final category would be a cannabis producer large, which is over 22,000 square foot canopy, which would be permitted indoors or outdoors with a special use permit in the I1 and I2 districts. Finally, the House bill that was passed, House Bill 2, creates a type of establishment called a vertically integrated cannabis establishment, which allows a person licensed by the state to act as all or any of the combination of the following: a cannabis courier, a cannabis manufacturer, a cannabis producer, or a cannabis retailer. The policy subcommittee recommends that a licensee seeking to run one vertically integrated cannabis establishment must be located in a zoning district that allows all the contemplated uses, which would make sense, right? So it would be permitted in all the districts. You want to grow, you want to do retail, and you want to have a consumption area, that's okay, as long as you're in a district that would allow those uses by right. Or if you do a combination of the set. And the best way to think of a vertically integrated is kind of like a beer garden, right? Where you're growing the hops there, you've got a brewery, and then you've got people consuming the beverage. So that would be how a scenario that would be similar to this. The next question was, are Chapter 14 amendments needed to address issues related to safety, security, and odors and ventilation? So regarding safety and security, House Bill 2 requires the Cannabis Control Division of the New Mexico Regulation and Licensing Department to adopt regulations to address security requirements, and a comprehensive draft of regulations have been published for comment. They haven't been adopted yet. The policy subcommittee intends to review the regulations when they have been promulgated and made available to ensure that they are appropriate for the city of Santa Fe. The policy subcommittee intends to propose additional legislation if any gaps are identified. Now, regarding odor and ventilation, this is a really big topic, very important. The policy subcommittee notes that existing buildings and fire codes and the city's nuisance ordinance likely address most of the concerns about preventing nuisance odors and ensuring safe, well-ventilated operations. The policy subcommittee recommends adding some general language to Chapter 14 to further address the issues based on the provisions that have been adopted by the city of Albuquerque and the county of Santa Fe. The city of Albuquerque requires cannabis establishments to have an odor control plan approved by the city. The county of Santa Fe requires certain cannabis producers and manufacturers to use industry standards to minimize odorous, toxic, and noxious matter. The next question that was posed was, what should the process be for conducting stakeholder outreach and community conversations prior to the adoption of new land use regulations for cannabis? So the policy subcommittee understands that the governing body solicited public input on cannabis at the governing body meeting held on August 2nd, 2021. I attended that meeting. There was 2 people who spoke, so it wasn't widely attended in terms of cannabis input, but one person spoke in favor and the other person was more concerned about kind of the public safety aspect of things. So public input is invited at the Planning Commission meeting scheduled for August 5th tonight. And notice of this opportunity has been posted on the city's Facebook page, and there will be a press release and on the city's Facebook page. In addition, public hearings are legally required as part of the approval of any legislative language. The policy subcommittee recommends that the city continue to issue media releases to alert the public of additional opportunities to provide input at upcoming Planning Commission and governing body meetings. Additional public input will also be sought for the regulations for cannabis consumption and retail areas. The policy subcommittee regrets that there is not more time available for stakeholder outreach outside of the public meetings, and recommends that this be improved as part of the subcommittee's process for all future work. The next and final question, should the definitions in Chapter 14 be amended to include new definitions for various types of cannabis? Yes, the answer is simply put, yes. The definitions should be consistent with the state and county definitions as customized to describe various types of land uses. I'm not going to go through every definition because these were published and given out ahead of time, but essentially all the different areas that we talked about with regard to commercial cannabis establishments, the different types of producers, consumption areas, canopy areas, these are all defined terms that are proposed by the policy subcommittee. What will happen after this discussion and public input is that the policy subcommittee will meet again and hopefully bring this item back on the 19th for a recommendation from the Planning Commission. And at such time a recommendation is given, if it's a positive recommendation, the recommendation would move forward to the governing body and the subcommittees of the governing body. And then the end result would be by the end of September that there would be new legislation drafted, including a memo that would be presented to the policy subcommittee, and then would be presented before the end of September, would be presented to the Planning Commission. And it would hopefully take all the feedback and all the recommendations, and we would make this as a text amendment to Chapter 14 and recommendations. So with that, Chair and Commissioners, I thank you, and that is all.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. We will have a public hearing on this, so if anybody in the public would like to speak on this, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. This time we're going to open up the public hearing. I don't see any hands. You, Noah?
Chair and Commissioners, no, I don't. But if any member would like to speak at all about cannabis or about what we've just discussed, please use the raise hand function, or if you're calling in, press *9, and we will unmute you so you can speak. Chair, I don't see any hands.
I don't either. We'll leave it. We'll close it for just another minute, just in case anybody does want to talk about this. Policy Subcommittee, thank you. It looks like you guys have really been working hard. Commissioners, any questions for those that are not on the Policy Subcommittee? Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was having a little bit of noise in the background, so I was trying to put some headphones, but questions in regards to the sale. I think in there you have the times from 7 a.m. to midnight. Is that correct? I think it's something in there. So like, and it seems to me that this really follows very closely to the way alcohol is being handled in terms of sales and where you can buy it, how far away it is from schools and other places such as that. But I know like on Sundays, you can't buy alcohol till 12 o'clock. Was that something that might've been maybe investigated at all? Anybody from the committee?
Chair, Commissioners, I'm happy to let the chair of the Policy Subcommittee, if Commissioner Faulkner would like to speak to this.
Yeah, Lee, could you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
It was just in regards to the time frame of when the sale of cannabis happens, and I think somewhere in here it states 7 o'clock a.m. and 12 midnight. And again, like I said, it follows kind of the way alcohol is being done. I know like Sundays is 12 o'clock. You can't buy a beer or anything at the supermarket until after 12 on Sundays. Was that looked at as part of the investigation for the sale?
No, actually, I think that the state has recently changed the alcohol liquor sales laws as of this 2021 session. And so we didn't consider Sundays. We wanted to kind of, and anyone else jump in here if I'm not correct. We wanted to kind of treat it like retail and not quite as specialized as alcohol, but follows some of the alcohol sales laws. So we kind of, we didn't discuss Sundays at all, that I recall.
Commissioner Garcia, members of the commission, I think Commissioner Faulkner is correct that this recent legislative session did remove that ban on alcohol sales prior to noon on Sunday. I think you can now sell starting at 7 a.m. 7 days a week.
Thank you. The other question I have is, do this recommendation for the sale and consumption and all that, how does that work in relation to what's already being done with medical marijuana dispensaries, and how do they follow or how do they follow these same guidelines, I guess, or are they exempt? Are they different?
Do you want me to take that one too, or do you want to take it, Sally?
I don't mind speaking to it. Mr. Burke can probably add additional information since he actually evaluates those establishments as they come in. But for medical retail, we are treating those as more of pharmacies and apothecaries. So they have a separate line item that already exists in our permitted uses table, and they're actually allowed to be in a broader number, I think, of a broader area of the city than is being proposed right now for the retail cannabis, commercial recreational cannabis sales. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Mr. Burke or Commissioner Faulkner.
I think I'm in agreement with what Sally has said.
The one thing that did concern me a little bit was that in talking to the state licensing and regulations division superintendent, right now all the medical license facilities, their licenses are coming up. And they have to resubmit by the 31st of August. And those facilities can open as commercial facilities for consumption, they can split from medical to a commercial facility right now, as soon as their new license comes out. And so that's one place where they're a little bit more, where I wish we had had more time, is to look at that stuff. But I think the thing that might protect us is that the regulations around consumption and around retail aren't even being addressed at the state level. So I doubt they're going to be permitted to do a lot until those regulations are out.
I want to chime in and agree that the existing retail establishments, it does sound like we'll be able to expand into the commercial recreational market. And under state law, we do need to grandfather existing locations and existing retailers who are maybe just doing medical. So I think our code would still allow, if somebody wanted to come in to solely do medical, to come in as a pharmacy or an apothecary under that use type. But if anybody now coming in wants to do both or just the commercial recreational side, they would have to comply with our new established retail use that we're creating now.
So then, could it be safe to say that a current location, either whether it's a pharmacy, a dispensary, an apothecary, if they're currently in an area where they might fall outside the parameters of these recommendations, I think you said they might be grandfathered in, but then would there at some point possibly be where they would fall non-compliant to the code or to how we're recommending, and how would that be handled?
Commissioner Garcia, members of the commission, we can't have anyone move if they're continuing to operate. So if they're already licensed and they're already existing, they will be grandfathered in their existing location. If they're in a location where we wouldn't permit them going forward, they would be a legally non-conforming use. And when you have a legal non-conforming use, we allow those to continue, but not to expand. And we allow them to continue unless they stop for a year. So if folks continuously operate the establishment and go ahead and follow all of their licensing requirements and our other regulations, they can stay, but they can't grow larger, and they'll be limited to their kind of existing location. And we can't make them move unless they stop for a year.
Yeah, and if I could add something to that too, one place where the state isn't super clear is if they're they're a medical facility, and right now they're just doing consumption, their new license can expand into retail, into production, into manufacturing. And they can request a location other than the one that they're given as part of their the one that they currently have. They can expand outside of that location per the state license. And so that's another place that's a little tricky, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot we can do as a city to prevent this because they're grandfathered in. And so there's not a lot we can do about the situation at this point. We can't prohibit them from doing business that they're legally allowed to do at the state level, from what I understand. So this is a niche that we can't really do anything about preventatively. We're probably gonna be more in the house of response than of reacting to it than to being able to do anything proactive. And that's something that the state has done. That is not something the city has much control over, if I understand it right.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Kluk, you want to add something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Commissioner Garcia, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to point out that it might be apropos, with this line of discussion for staff to present the illustrations that we have for the buffer zones, the various sizes. That was supposed to be part of the presentation, so I'd like to make sure it's included for your benefit.
Thank you.
So are we needing me to try to pull up the interactive map or the PDFs, or what are we proposing here? Or the most recent map that we got from the state?
No, I think what we would want to do is the buffer map. So where we took the random points plus the existing cannabis locations, the one that Jennifer made for us most recently.
Yeah, I think it might be good for the commissioners who aren't on the policy committee to get a feel for the locations and the number of existing medical facilities that are going to be probably seeking these other licenses.
And no, while they're pulling that up, can I ask you if any of these existing facilities are within 300 feet of anything that's being prohibited, recommended for prohibited at this coming forward?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I don't know if they're within 300 feet. We put this map together pretty quickly. And so I don't know which will be legal non-conforming, but if they are within 300 feet, they're going to be grandfathered in. And at any time that they stop operating, then they lose their grandfathering status and they'll have to locate 300 feet away. What you will see on this map, which is no longer in existence anymore, is New Mexican. Maybe some folks remember they were in the news for some problems with their extraction facility that was off of Pacheco. That's in an industrial district. And they no longer have their license, but you will see them on this map. But the point of this map was the policy subcommittee wanted to demonstrate what buffer zone or what distances would look like throughout the city. So we picked some random addresses on Airport Road, on Cerrillos Road, on St. Michael's Drive, and in the downtown. And each of the lines demonstrates a distance from the property. So the first line you'll see the very, like a bullseye, the bullseye at the very center is the actual business, right? The first line after that business is going to be 100 feet. The second line after that is going to be 200 feet, then 300 feet, 400 feet, and 600 feet away. The policy subcommittee initially kind of looked at the downtown because that was of concern. And what we found with the downtown is that the blocks are really small. So, there wasn't kind of we first started looking at what would 600 feet look like if you wouldn't allow a cannabis establishment within 600 feet of an existing or a new cannabis establishment. That took out like 6 city blocks sometimes in the downtown area, but that's not true across the city. The city has different sized blocks throughout. So the point of this map is to decide the Planning Commission to see what it looks like in real time for each of these distances away, and then decide when you have overlapping, that means it wouldn't be allowed. So when you have overlapping lines, that means that if we chose that distance where the lines overlap, we would not allow it because it just couldn't happen. And this also shows existing cannabis establishments as well. So it's really, I think the policy subcommittee felt that, yes, we need to decide on a distance from the property lines, much like the short-term rental ordinances has distances from property lines and density limitations, but decide what is the right distance for the city uniformly across.
Yeah.
On this one map you have up, if it goes through recommended at 300 feet, I would knock this down to 2, or am I mistaken? Because the reds are hitting on 2 of them, and on all 3 of them are hitting in the reds, which are the 300 feet. So if the recommendations go forward as presented, these 5 would then turn into only 2 allowed in that area?
Again, existing establishments will be.
No, I understand. I'm just a hypothetical for the future brand new ones.
Correct. Hypothetical for the future is we're trying to decide if there should be a minimum distance between establishments, new establishments going forward, and if so, what should that distance be? And you're correct. That is those red lines, I believe, are 300 feet.
So everything's within the 300 feet, and that would just, take it down to 2 establishments versus 5 if the 300 foot goes through as a recommendation.
Correct, in this little area, and I'm kind of zoomed in. I can zoom out if that's helpful. The other thing that I do have as well is the Deputy Secretary of Regulation and Licensing, John Blair, did send us their most recent data in terms of existing establishments. And there's a Google map link that he sent for that too, that I could probably share on the screen, that actually breaks these down by types of establishment. And it's also, I think, more current data. This particular interactive GIS map does include, well, we did put existing establishments based on a list that we found on the state's website before we got the latest information from the folks over at Regulation and Licensing. But this also includes, at NOAA's request, some sort of more hypothetical circles. So if I zoom further out, you can see some of these are not existing establishments, but they're sort of in other parts of town to just provide more data points in terms of what those buffers would look like in different zoning districts and different parts of town. So it's a little tricky for me to drive for everyone, but if there's, you know, somewhere you want me to zoom in on, or if you want to see that other map, I'm happy to go over there too.
I think my big takeaway from this is that the majority of them are bunched in within the same location right now. The medical is just my thought on what we're seeing. The majority are bunched together, while some are separated. But
we've got a couple over here. Yeah, they're a little spread out. There's a couple existing way to the south here, a couple existing out, you know, down off Cerrillos, but quite a few in our BCD area. So our downtown business capital district does have quite a few, a couple right downtown. So.
thank you. Commissioner Garcia, you still have the floor.
Thank you for the additional information there. I that was just kind of my concern, and I know that these are already operating businesses, and they fall under the pharmacy or apothecary or establishment, dispensaries, and so I get it all, and that would be my other concern, is that other businesses that would open up. How is it, you know, they're going to target areas that are easier access, more traffic, and which would tend to possibly add more to these areas. And I guess the last thing I would just want to say in the comment to the policy committee, kudos to you guys. You guys worked hard, and it looks like you guys really worked hard on it and well thought out. So thank you guys for your hard work.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. I'm just going to follow up with just two quick questions. Is there something in there, and I didn't see it, that says that, or is this buffer zone that's being proposed going to include existing medical to keep them 300 feet away, or is that not language that was included?
The current recommendations do not include language like that. I think it's because existing are existing. And we do anticipate that it's likely that the existing medical retailers are going to expand into the commercial market and will likely serve both going forward. So, you know, as we mentioned, we're not going to be asking existing establishments to leave. We don't have legal authority to do that. So depending on what type of buffer zone we establish around these existing retail establishments, that could preclude folks coming in, and it could certainly preclude in a larger or smaller area. Yeah.
I would just say, as going forward, to possibly commissioners look at maybe including existing, so you don't have two overlapping, even though they're different but the same, as far as that goes.
And Chair, if I might, Sally, can you zoom into that downtown location, that point I picked right there in the middle? Just like zoom into there. I think it's really important to see this. If we zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so those are each of the circles that represent distance. Look at, I think it's important to see the first line being 100, right? So we picked an address point where somebody actually is interested. This is a real address point that somebody's interested in having a retail establishment. The expectation would be there would probably be a lot of cannabis established retail locations in the downtown. That's just kind of what we would imagine, because that's a tourist center, you know, and it would probably do pretty well. So this point right here is an actual request that we have pending, that they like when they're able to have a retail establishment here. each of the lines is a distance from that property, 100, 200, 300, 400, and 600 feet. If you see, that's how many, every time that line goes out, that means that if you choose that distance, if you choose the red line, which is 300 feet, all those businesses within that circle, all the little businesses, and I guarantee you there's about 30 or 40 addresses within that little circle, if not more, will not be able to have a cannabis retail establishment. So I think it's really important to see this, because you start to see the building footprints and you see how many buildings won't be able, so that whatever the recommendation becomes, that you don't monopolize basically a cannabis retail establishment that gets it, the first one to get it, and then also you don't push them out, right? So that there's still kind of a competitive market for economic development. So I think it's important to see this in the downtown and see how many buildings and properties and addresses are affected from that automatically would be disqualified from having a cannabis establishment if the distance was chosen at each of the said lines.
Thank you. Secretary Clow.
I think that there was some concern in terms of density, that especially on my part in the downtown area, that will be the area where I think a lot of new businesses will open, because there's tourism and money down there and people are spending money. And so it in terms of not totally changing the character of downtown, it makes sense to have buffer. And it's interesting to note that Albuquerque has 600 feet between businesses. Of course, they're a bigger city, so 600, there's more commercial space, so 600 is probably somewhat reasonable for Albuquerque. The county did 200, and they state that they only did 200 because they're looking at 200 feet because they don't have much commercial space. The county's more residential and rural and industrial, so they had less space, less density. Albuquerque, it's also interesting to note, has a 1-year moratorium on any retail businesses in Old Town. I think that the mayor and some other people are concerned about the changing character of Old Town, and also the effect that the changing character could have on the current economic situation that Old Town brings to Albuquerque. So I think it probably makes sense for us to look at limiting it. It doesn't, frankly, 300 feet doesn't bother me. And I think some of us on the committee were even looking at 400 feet. There's still a lot of the downtown area for that would qualify for businesses.
So Secretary Cloud, do you think 300 or 400 feet is optimum citywide for this?
Yeah, I think when we looked at, when we had it illustrated, we're sort of looking at 600, I think. But then when we, sort of took a look at what 600 meant by these illustrations, it seemed like that was probably too much, probably not too much for Albuquerque because they're so big. They have so much commercial space. Santa Fe is much smaller, less commercial space. So I think we were that's why we were recommending 300 to 600 for now. I think we weren't really necessarily picking a number, but sort of doing a range so that we could get input from the public, input from city council, and then come back and explore it when we're looking at the ordinance. I don't know if it's necessary tonight to pick a number. Maybe just the range 300 to 600 again. And that's what we were recommending.
I don't think we're going to do any decision making, just kind of vetting it and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you talk about a moratorium in the plaza area? Anybody on the commission? Or
I did,
subcommittee? I'm
but
sorry.
I did, but no one else liked that idea. You know, I really do think that these new businesses are going to follow the money, and I think the money's going to be downtown. And I think listening to the other members of the committee, it convinced me that if we did, enough buffering with the density issue, that, we could probably reach my goal of not changing the character of downtown and running out, the current character of the tourist at this point in time, and becoming like Las Vegas or Denver.
Thank you. Commissioner Faulkner.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some feedback as well. Part of the challenge for the density buffers is that the committee felt very strongly that we would not create density in one district of the city that was different from other districts. And so we were trying to strike a balance. One thing that happens is if we pushed it out of the downtown area by making the buffers so big that only a handful of businesses could be there, but we didn't protect the rest of the city by buffering uniformly, then we would just push the cannabis industry into more residential zones. And that was not something any of us wanted to do. We didn't want one district to either have the lion's share in a positive way or to have the lion's share in a negative way. And so when you're looking at these buffers, take into consideration that they're uniform throughout the city, and that the committee felt in alignment with the state in the intent of the legislation made it very clear that they did not want cities to cluster cannabis. They wanted it to be uniformly spread out throughout throughout the cities and counties, so that you didn't have either, again, one part of town getting all the benefit of the cannabis industry, or another part of the town with other challenges getting the highest level burden because the industry was shoved into districts that aren't prepared to handle it. And so when you look at this, just remember that this is how it's going to look throughout the entire city. Whatever we pick, since we're discussing downtown, whatever we pick for downtown is going to be the whole city, if the recommendations of the policy committee are adhered to.
Gotcha. And did you follow when I was telling Sally about maybe talking in your subcommittee about including a buffer zone from already established medical that's there? If you could just bring up the conversation, you don't have to answer me. Commissioner Satenia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation and some of the points that were made with regards to the committee. I think, putting this map together to look at the different densities that could be taken in consideration, and taking in consideration, Janet's points, trying to protect the downtown area. I think, the map you're looking at right now demonstrates, and even if you zoom out more, I don't know, Sally, if you can zoom out. Santa Fe is unique in that we don't have a lot of places where these new retail businesses. So, where we are different than in Albuquerque. Taking into consideration the limitation of where these businesses can go, we felt that it was important to apply this density equitably across our city. And the other unique thing about Santa Fe, which is not just distinct to downtown Santa Fe, is the limit of the space, but how dense the buildings are within that space. So, Sally, if you can zoom into the downtown area. Right there, smack in the middle of the. Go to the one that's right there next to the plaza. And as Chair Pilar had stated, if you look at downtown, right there where the plaza is, 600 feet is going to eliminate any other establishment being, right there. And I think that's something that we need to be concerned across the city of Santa Fe, just given the density that happens. That one location would have an advantage. And while it might protect, the downtown area from having too many cannabis retail stores, the question I think that should be asked from everyone, is it equitable for, other businesses to go into this area? So again, trying to find a balance between, is 600 feet too restrictive given the existing density and the available retail space in our city? I think that's the question that we should be asking ourselves when, or the governing body should be asking themselves when looking at applying these buffers, these density buffers. So that's the only thing that I wanted to add. I also wanted to say that the majority of us didn't think that any district should be, treated any, more special than any other one, to the points that Commissioner Faulkner made. And I also wanted to point out that staff and also felt that was consistent with the intent of the New Mexico law. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that we shouldn't necessarily be, singling out one district over the other. And my understanding was that the memorandum that was in, that was created for the city of Albuquerque was already potentially seeing some objections legally by singling out those areas. But I can let staff speak to that.
Commissioner Satania. Sally, do you have a quick 2 cents to add about Albuquerque, or are you going to pass?
I do have concerns, certainly about a moratorium. I think, our office is really not inclined to recommend any kind of moratorium. I also want to say that, yes, the state law definitely emphasizes this desire to have entry into this new economy. This is seen as a big driver of economic development. We really want to let smaller micro business type establishments have a shot, and really letting in local people who have, not always had an equitable chance in terms of how drug policies and things in the past have been applied. So certainly the equity concerns, the ability to sort of foster smaller businesses, small local businesses, those sort of micro establishments. The other thing that we as a city cannot do is anything that would have the effect of completely prohibiting a licensee from operating. So as you get more restrictive, you certainly can start bumping into those kind of legal challenges. So I think that's a valid concern as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Faulkner.
Yeah, and one other thing to consider, I was at the Roundhouse for much of the hearings, and I was tracking the hearings for cannabis for one of my clients. And what I can say about it is that definitely there is a benefit to having cannabis in the areas, especially commercial cannabis, in the areas of a town that have the higher number of tourists, because there are unintended consequences related to cannabis. And it seems like the formula considered and how to handle this included the concept that it's better to have people who are from out of your city or out of your state buying cannabis, and then the GRT that's coming in isn't from your own people. And so you can help offset the costs that cannabis has connected to it by boosting the areas of town that will have the most traffic for buyers. And so, but then, the thing that's dangerous about that is then you risk the part of, if you're not careful, you risk some of the traditions and values that matter to your city being overwhelmed by cannabis, because it can. We studied, I think collectively as a team, we studied Los Angeles, Boulder, Fort Lewis, Las Cruces, Denver, Las Vegas. And when we say we studied them, I personally contacted the land use departments in several of those cities to see what was happening in those cities. And cannabis can overwhelm a downtown area. But you got to try and strike the balance of, we want enough there that we get the cost benefit, we get the benefit of having it in a high traffic area, but we also don't want it so much there that the downtown area becomes a cannabis location in total. And so that was another one of the tricky things to figure out, is how do we balance the benefit of encouraging it in high traffic areas while not losing sight of what things we needed to protect that are traditionally part of Santa Fe.
Thank you. Mr. Burke, I can't see, but did anybody raise their hand? I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there anybody that wanted to speak on this before I close the public hearing? We'll give you a minute to raise your hand. Mr. Burke, on page 4 of 7 of the memo where it's talking about growing, let me see if I can get there. I just have a quick question, because this is, I think I know the answer, but it's kind of confusing.
And Chair, I'm going to go ahead and pop out of this map, but if anybody wants me to reshare, please don't hesitate to ask.
Okay, so and if this isn't a question for you, Mr. Burke, whoever can answer this, cannabis producer, micro business, extra small, medium. So all of those are permitted in I-1 and I-2, or recommended to be permitted in I-1 and I-2. And then that's indoors. Are they also recommended in those areas for outdoors? Because it kind of looks like it's a little confusing to me.
Chair, commissioners, they would be any growing operation that's going to be allowed outdoors would be require a special use permit.
Okay, it reads permitted indoors or outdoors with special use permit, but then it just says C4 BIP in all of those. So does that include I-1 and I-2?
Yes, it does.
Was that the intention? Because it's not listed on there, so just for clarity.
Yes, I apologize for that. That is the intent.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Anybody in attendance raise their hand for the public hearing?
Chair, there's nobody who has raised their hand.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this. Commissioners on the subcommittee, you did a lot of work in a short period of time. Thank you for all that work and taking on this task. I'll get back to my agenda now.
Chair, it does, the policy.
Go ahead, Commissioner Faulkner.
One thing we would really appreciate is any kind of feedback. The 300 to 600 mark, that was something we really felt we needed more feedback on. So any kind of feedback on that would be appreciated as this moves forward. It seems like our timeline has been expanded a little bit. And so we still, from what I understand, we still have the 19th, but definitely some kind of feedback on this would be helpful.
Okay, can just send our comments to Mr. Burke and he can distribute them to you with subcommittee and yourself in the subcommittee.
Yep.
Okay. And on the next one, did you, Commissioner Faulkner asked to broaden the base for public comment next door or some other platform?
Yeah, and we'll work with staff to figure out if clearly what we did wasn't enough. And so one thing we're very passionate about is making sure that the public is aware that there's access to a public comment on this through the Planning Commission. And so between now and the next meeting, we'll definitely be working with staff to increase the visibility of these meetings and try to get more community feedback. One of the difficult things on getting the public involved at the policy committee level is we don't have the bandwidth, authority. We have none of the things necessary to get the public to be involved. And so we have to use the planning commission or the city council or the committee process through the city council to get public comment.
Right, well, we'll have another hearing on this and it's going to be a public hearing. So whatever we can do if they're interested or anybody's listening. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the second order of business, case number 2021-3809, Southside Teen Center Development Plan.
Chair, Commissioner
Chair.
Catania had his hand raised.
I'm sorry, I can't see it. Tell me who had their hand raised.
Commissioner Catania?
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Setenia, you didn't pop up on my screen. Please go ahead.
No worries. I did just want to offer that there are, you might have noticed that under growing the various categories that were created, that for a lot of them, they are being permitted in the same areas. And it's important that these are read as placeholders. One of the things that we had to deal with regards to zoning is, and just growing in general, is that while the state defines most of their definitions by numbers of plants, that numbers of plants don't necessarily include the size of the growing operation. So for 200 plants, you could grow that in a 20-foot by 20-foot small greenhouse, depending on the growing style, or you could grow 200 mature plants on an entire acre if they're growing like trees. So because we as the Planning Commission are dealing with the built environment, square footage is very important. And that is why we created extra small, small, medium, and large based on canopy size. And for indoor, that canopy size would be based on the lighting canopy. And for outdoors, that would just be based on the square footage of the growing operation, the growing canopy. Now, one of the things that we're probably going to have to look at, and Commissioner Faulkner and could correct me, but we might be making potential modifications to eliminate the cannabis producer micro business, because it doesn't necessarily state a square foot. It's only based on 200 mature plants. And again, to my earlier point, that could mean 200 plants grown in a 20-foot by 20-foot or over an entire acre. So again, I think it's important to point out why we created these as placeholders. And you might see that the zoning is the same across multiple categories.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, moving on to case 2021-3809, Southside Teen Center Development Plan.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. Wilson and Company, agent for the City of Santa Fe Public Works Department, requests final development plan approval for construction of a new teen center to be located at the southwest corner of Valentine Way and Country Club Road, approximately 500 feet north of Jaguar Drive. The proposed Southside Teen Center development plan will provide for a 17,188 square foot building to be used for a variety of recreational and educational activities, as will be constructed and operated by the City of Santa Fe. The 1.8 acre project site is located on a larger city-owned 4.5 acre parcel, is located within the Tierra Contenta Master Plan area. The proposed center is deemed compatible with nearby public facilities, as well as some single-family residential development located to the northwest and some multifamily residential development located to the northeast. The proposed Southside Teen Center development plan meets all applicable development standards and will not create nonconformities with either City Code Chapter 14 Land Development Standards and Requirements or the Tierra Contenta Master Plan. Additionally, the proposed development plan meets required approval criteria contained within City Section City Code Section 14-3.8, which governs the authority, procedures, and restrictions for such plans. For these reasons, staff are recommending approval of the Southside Teen Center Development Plan, inclusive of the draft findings of fact and conclusions of law attached as Exhibit A to the staff report. This concludes staff's overview of the project and recommendation, and staff, of course, will remain available to provide you with additional information as required. Additionally, I would just add that present this evening for the applicant team is Sam Burnett with the city's Public Works Department and Brett Beatty with Wilson & Company. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mr. Beatty or Mr. Burnett, do you have a presentation for us?
We do.
Yeah. Take it away, Brett.
Thanks, Sam.
I need to go ahead and swear you in, please. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Brett Beatty. My address is 4512 Jupiter Street Northwest, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87107.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, John, for your overview, and Sam for your support through this this entire endeavor. We are here to present this project. It's an important project for the city of Santa Fe. It's been going on for a little over a year now. And do I have permission to share my screen?
You do.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start. Essentially, we are just south of the golf course, as was stated on Valentine Way and on Country Club, directly across the street from the existing Southside Library. The existing library is here. YMCA and other community facilities, leased facilities are on this property here. The property that we are looking at is this property on the corner, which is the northeast corner of Country Club and Valentine Way. There are residential neighborhoods surrounding this. The proposed plan is directly on the corner, so it fronts on the street. It's a one-story building with larger volumes for the gymnasium and for the center playroom that are stepped away from the street so that there's not an abrupt change of elevation. The parking is shielded in the back, and the play area is protected and fenced in for supervision towards the rear, towards the south and the west side. There is a potential for future additional parking down here on the south, but it's not part of the plan as it is today. There are pedestrian connections to the library and to the adjoining neighborhoods, and a drop off along the street along Valentine Way. For the purpose of this facility is primarily teenagers. The sweet spot is between 9 and 14 years old. And so most of those don't drive, so they would either be walking, riding their bikes, or being dropped off by parents or guardians. The facility itself has a main entrance and a control point. Supervision is important to know who's in the facility and when they leave, when they arrive. The staff controls the administration area here and the main control desk. There is a raised kind of stage area in this main lobby. To the one side is a gymnasium with a weight room and storage. The other side is a large game type room that has smaller breakout rooms, both for reduced noise, so that for studying or other activities or specialized art activities can be clustered in those rooms. And then there's a kitchen area towards the back that has service off of the site on the backside for deliveries and for refuse. There's a public restroom, of course. There's a private restroom for staff. There is a lot of portal area facing out towards the road, which helps to reduce and minimize the overall volume of the building. From the elevation, there's basically a tiled area on the front. This is kind of looking at the corner, and you can see that we tried to, as much as possible, step back the volumes so that none of them were directly on the roadway or any of the property lines, giving that kind of, reducing that mass. It was the intention. The building is primarily stucco with some ceramic tile at the entryway. There are some translucent panels up above to give daylighting and natural light to the interior of the building. And then at the street level, there's both doors and windows. This is the view from the play area courtyard. There is a double door that can be raised for the stage area, and then two flanking wings, this being the kitchen area over here, and this being the gymnasium on the left side. So in the images, in the rendered images, this is what it would look like from that corner, from that intersection of Valentine Way and Country Club. The main entrance with an arched canopy. Everything's at scale of pedestrian, in connection to the street and to the adjoining neighborhoods. Kind of a bird's eye view of what this plaza might look like on the corner. The final design is changing that just a bit, but it still has a plaza feel to it on the corner. These were earlier renderings, but they still give an idea of what it really looks like. The portal that wraps around, protecting those from the parking lot so they get to the front door without getting in inclement weather, without getting rained or snowed on, and also protecting them, keeping a shade and reducing that overall volume. This is from the back side, and this is the parking area. I do want to say that some things have changed since these renderings. One is that we now have canopies with photovoltaics on them, and that is for two purposes. It's to reduce heat island effect and to generate electricity. This is a proposed LEED silver building. That's what we're trying to get it certified as. And so this parking lot will be shaded and covered with photovoltaic panels. And the final image is from the bird's eye from the intersection. The overall development fills the site pretty well and shields the parking, and that's what we're presenting. Are there any questions?
We'll get back to you with questions. Mr. Burnett, is there anything you want to add, or you want to wait to see what questions pop up? Or
Mr. Chair, I'll wait for questions. Thank you.
okay. This is a public hearing. If anybody would like to speak on this case, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Also, there's one phone call in. If you want to speak on this case, *9, Noah.
Yes, Chair, that is correct. It would be *9. Chair, there is a member, Elena Gonzalez from EarthCare, is here to represent them. And they would like to do a little presentation. Is that correct, Elena?
Yes, sir.
I've loaded the presentation on my screen. So if if you can just guide me if the chair and the commission is okay with the presentation.
And we'll just need to swear Ms. Gonzalez in real quick before proceeding as well.
Okay. Ms. Gonzalez, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Elena Gonzalez, 20 Royale Lane, Santa Fe.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I could share my screen if that would make things easier for you.
It's up to you, Ms. Gonzalez.
Sorry, I apologize. You broke up a bit.
It's up to you, Ms. Gonzalez. If it's easier for you to share your screen and then guide, that would be fine as well.
Okay. Do I have permission to share my screen?
You do.
Okay, thank you so much. So, okay. So I hope you guys can see this okay. Good evening, Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Elena Gonzalez, and I am a youth leader of Earth Care and Yucca. Yucca, if you don't know, is Youth United for Climate Crisis Action, and that is our youth-led climate justice arm. Thank you for having us here tonight and for giving me the chance to speak to you. We are very excited about the Teen Center progress, and we are here because we too have been making progress on this project. This summer, we have engaged tons and dozens of our peers in dreaming about the Teen Center and its design. We've had planning meetings and a community meeting. We also attended the public neighborhood meeting about the Teen Center hosted by the city earlier this summer. We've met with our area city councilor to bring our recommendations, and we've also met with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Board. We are excited about the project, how it is unfolding, and we're here to make sure that you know that the youth of our community and our Southside community specifically are ready to lead the process, and we want to make sure that we have a seat at this table and at every step of decision making and planning. We are a group of youth from the area and family leaders who have a stake not just in this project, but in all projects being proposed for our community. We want to work with you to develop community-driven projects. And from all the input we've gathered in this last round of engagement, what we've done with all of this engagement and polls, we've created this presentation. And we don't have time to share the entire presentation tonight in detail because it's 15 minutes long, but I just want to flip through it quickly to give you a sense of the level of concern and thought and leadership we are putting into this project and plan to continue to contribute. We have a shared folder with staff. I believe it was shared with Noah and Mr. Burke. And in that folder is a slideshow, a video of us presenting, and the report we did in 2019 with extensive community engagement in our peers. So I believe Noah will share that with you, but I'm just going to flip through this slideshow really quickly. So this is design of the building on the site and how it includes a really, spacious outside space. We had a lot of concerns and the feedback at the neighborhood meeting about how the outside was laid out. So we've gotten lots of input into that, and we wanted to make sure that this part of the vision is incorporated. We see the importance of building a cohesive site and campus at the Zona del Sol property, including the current building and the YMCA and the new teen center. We want to make a beautiful community campus that serves us young people and our families. We have recommendations about the features inside of the buildings and some key things we want to flag before the construction plans get finalized. We have important recommendations about accessibility and also important recommendations about overall safety. and important recommendations about leadership, including staff, governance, and decision-making at the center and throughout the rest of the planning process. So that's just kind of a quick run through. And we're very grateful to you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and Mr. Burke for being willing to hear from us tonight. We don't need to take up a lot of time during this meeting to get into the details because we will share this presentation with you, our recommendations in writing, and like I said earlier, the video of the presentation. What we'd really like to ensure is that our Community Development Steering Committee working on the Teen Center is able to be involved in the decision-making from here on out, and that the youth have a seat at the table and a strong leading voice every step of the way. And that our recommendations, which come from so many community members, as well as the hundreds of youth that we engaged in 2019, are centered in the process. We've talked to Mr. Burke about setting up a meeting to follow up so that we can make sure our recommendations are integrated. And on behalf of Earth Care and Yucca and our Southside youth leaders, thank you so much.
Thank you. Gabriel Romero, Mr. Burke.
Yes. Okay.
And anybody else that wants to talk on this project, raise your hand.
Gabe, go ahead and you'll be sworn in.
Okay. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Gabe Romero, 2195 West Sierra Road in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Thank you.
Chairman, Commissioners, I wanted to pose actually a question. The Community Leadership High School is a charter school that has an application in to become a district charter school in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they had identified this particular location to house their school. I was curious to know if there'd been any discussion in regards to that.
That's your only question and input, Mr. Romero. I'll see if staff can answer that later, but I would like you to finish if you have anything else.
No, that is all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody else want to speak on this case in front of us? Commissioners? Questions?
Chair, did you want to close the public hearing or is it still open?
I'm waiting just a minute to see if anybody else pops up, but I don't see anybody. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And I will turn it over to the commissioners. Commissioner Faulkner.
Yeah, I would just like to say this has been a dream for the Tierra Contenta community for, I would say 15 to 20 years. I think it's vital for the community, given the number of kids who live in Tierra Contenta and in the area, and who I think need the support from their community. Tierra Contenta is very diverse and it's an awesome place to live, but there are some challenges and some at-risk populations that this facility will most definitely help. And in the beginning, when we first bought our home in Tierra Contenta, that area where they're putting the teen center was called El Corazon because it was supposed to be the heart of the community. And so seeing the teen center go in there is just, it's exciting. And I almost want to pinch myself because it's been a long road to get to this place for that group. And I just want to commend the young people who are helping. I know that it's important that they have a voice at the table and that they stay involved, because this teen center from its conception was meant to be something that belonged to the young people of Tierra Contenta, and that it was theirs in every possible way that it could be. So I would urge all the commissioners to support this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner. Mr. Burnett, I'm going to circle back to you to answer Mr. Romero's question, but first I'm going to go to Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have I'd like to echo the same words that Commissioner Faulkner had. I mean, it's something that's been a long time coming for our community here on the south side of Santa Fe. Tierra Contenta, with the amount of youth and families in this area. I mean, I've lived here for close to 18 years, right near the site. And, you know, my kids grew up riding their bikes around and going to the small park that was placed just on the other side there on Valentine Way. And it is something that's very well needed. I'd like to give kudos to the Elena Gonzalez and her group for participating in this, and hopefully that they their ideas come forth and incubate and become part of this this process, this project. The couple of questions I had, and I guess this could possibly go to Mr. Beatty. The site plan, and I know it's not a complete site plan, it's just kind of a visual aid. Kind of looking at the wishes of the youth. There was a skate park in there involved. There was a few other areas that were outside of the building. Are those some of the things that are going to be taken into consideration, other than just having a gym and a weight room and a community area inside the building?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Garcia, I'm just going to jump in real quick. My apologies. We have actually broken this project into 2 phases.
Sam, I'm real sorry to interrupt you, but I would just maybe request, since you're presenting sort of as an applicant and not so much as the case planner, if you could maybe just be sworn in. I really apologize for interrupting you in midstream there. Thank you so much.
Quite all right.
Okay. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Sam Burnett, and I live at 131 Sam Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87501.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes, please. Thank you. Sorry, Sam.
No problem. So we, for various reasons, have broken this project into 2 phases. The first phase is very much focused on the building and a simple surrounding landscape. And then we intend in the near future to embark on a phase 2 that expands on the landscape of the building. And at that point, we very much intend to once again reach out to the community and engage them in the planning process. So the current plan does not include everything that was presented by Earth Care this evening, but there is still room for community input to be incorporated into an additional phase of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. I also would like to maybe ask in regards to parking, and I know that I read it in the packet that the limited parking spaces are largely due to youngsters riding their bikes, walkability to the area, but there will be people parking. There will be parents bringing their kids. And so the initial parking in phase 1, can you elaborate a little bit on how that is going to work, and at what point are you going to add the additional parking that's possibly proposed?
I can answer that. We've got reduced parking for a couple of reasons. One is the anticipated use. There are sufficient parking spaces for parents dropping kids off. Most kids aren't driving, so they're not driving themselves to this facility. Generally, at that point, they start going other places once they have vehicles. There is a potential of adding more parking or other uses. We're also trying to meet the reduced parking requirements as stipulated by LEED, and Santa Fe's own regulations are wanting reduced parking. So we're trying to balance all those matters. If possible, that piece of property that those additional parking spaces were shown on might be better served for an outdoor activity zone for other kinds of activities. So it's a balance of what the needs are as we move forward. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I just again would maybe reiterate that the reality is there will still be people coming to park, and I anticipate this this building is not only going to be utilized by our youth and our teens. There may be some other community members. Are other community members able to utilize the facility?
I really can't answer the operational questions of the facility. That would be a city. The city is going to run it, and so it's going to be city staff that are going to be managing it.
Mr. Burnett, can you answer that?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Garcia, I do believe that the use of the facility is open to the entire community, very much with an emphasis on youth in the neighborhoods. The actual programming of the building and how it's used is being managed by the Recreation Division, and that's all still in process. But throughout the planning process and design process, incorporating the entire community has been something that's been discussed.
And Commissioner Garcia, planning commissioners, I would just add also in regard to parking, the term reduction in parking as it happens is probably not applicable here. As it happens, the city standards for this type of recreational facility are not specific in regard to so many spaces for so many net square footage of building, but rather it's kept open-ended so that during the development plan stage, presumably, or other steps in the development process, that it could be determined what the appropriate standard is. But again, just to clarify, the city does not have a specific standard for this type of facility.
Thank you for those clarifications. And again, I just going back to parking can be a major issue when you got 20, 30 families that want to utilize this facility and they drive and they park. There is other parking areas that probably will be used, the crisis center across the street and so on and so forth. But I just hope that adequate time will be spent on making it to where people can park safely and don't have too many issues for crowding. And the last comment I would have is I just listening to Ms. Gonzalez. She had a very good presentation. And some of the questions that they had, and hopefully again this goes into the planning process of the future, would hopefully that the place is staffed adequately and is operated and governed well. And so I think that's just some of their main concerns. And kudos to everybody for this Southside Teen Center. It's going to be something that's well received. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Setenia, motion or questions?
Motion.
Okay, hold on real quick. Is there any other commissioners that have questions? Looks like none. I'm gonna just put in 2 cents real quick and beat up parking a little bit more with Commissioner Garcia. Having young kids and this being a gymnasium, there's families that come in all at the same time and leave all at the same time. So Sam, maybe it might be worth looking at maybe just some base course and a little bit of grading over so they can have a makeshift parking as opposed to going to the neighboring crisis center, having to cross from the library or something to that effect. Just something to keep in mind, because if this gets into league play, this gymnasium, they're all coming and going at the same time, and everybody's looking for that area. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing for the South Side. I'm a horseman and a demon at the same time, and I'm a District 1 and District 3 guy because I work in District 3, live in District 1. But I'm so excited to see this coming through. The one thing I do see with facilities of this nature, and this has nothing to do with the development plan, I'm just putting out my 2 cents, is that they're always used at the same time, after school and weekends. It might be worth, Mr. Burnett, looking at pickleball for the elderly in the daytime to be at this facility. And my last point that I want to make is, with it having a kitchen, something that would be wonderful for the South Side would be a catering kitchen that could be rented out, because it's going to be used minimally also. So just some things to look at, in my opinion, going forward. Thank you guys for everything. Commissioner Satania, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just want to start by commending those that have made the efforts to make this a LEED certified building. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I also want to acknowledge Elena Gonzalez for her contributions to the community and just being a young person on behalf of other young people. So thank you for your presentation. With that, I move to approve the development plan for case 2021-3809, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff. And I would also like to move to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law for case 2021-3809, Exhibit A2.
Commissioner Faulkner to second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. If I can get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before you go on,
Go ahead, Commissioner Faulkner, please.
I'm gonna have to leave the meeting. I have an injury and I cannot sit any longer. I apologize to everyone.
No problem. Ms. Byers, if you'll just note it for the record.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
We do still have a quorum of 5, so we can carry on.
All right, and we'll do it carrying on. I may need help reading the next case caption, Noah, but let me see if I can get it real quick. Case 2021-3804 via Sendero Development Plan Amendment for Phase 2. Swinett.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. This is Donna Wynett, and let's see, let me bring my report up. I'll just do a verbal report. And here I am. Okay, nice to see everybody. Okay. Case number 2021-3804. Via Sendero Development Plan Amendment for Phase 2. Decker, Parish, Sabatini, with Will Gleason as the agent for Via Sendero LLC. CSM Properties LTD owner request approval of a development plan amendment. The applicant requests approval of Phase 2 of the project to include 24 additional multifamily units on a parcel, approximately 1 acre in size, to the southwest of the subject property, directly south of the fashion outlets of Santa Fe. The amendment to Phase 2 also includes a fitness building to replace an apartment building in Phase 1, resulting in a net gain of 6 units to the Via Sendero project to 258 units and minor changes to a drive aisle and multi-use trail. The property is approximately 11.4 acres in size and it's zoned C2, which is general commercial, and is located at 5132 Beckner Road. The original development, which we're calling phase 1, was approved. It was approved in last year, January 23rd, for the 252 unit multi-family apartment development. Since then, the applicant decided to acquire or look at a piece of property, 1 acre in size, to the southwest of this site. And for the 24 units that you see before you this evening. In evaluating the project, there's some interesting things there. They decided to take out or redesign the site to remove the 18 unit apartment building in the center of the site and make that a fit, an area for a fitness center, excuse me. And then do the 24 unit building there on that parcel to the southwest and south of the fashion outlets. That is a big part of this revision, or the phase 2. So in evaluating, I'm going to keep this brief because I know the applicant has a nice PowerPoint presentation. So essentially, when we evaluate the proposal, we found that it does meet the criteria for evaluating development plans. And looking at the criteria for development plans for all the different things we look at for placement of property, of the development, setbacks, all the different things that we would look at. It does meet that for parking and all the other things we look at. So we're recommending approval, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections that are in the staff report. I do want to mention that we did meet with, or I met with the applicant, the agent, developer, and the fire marshal to evaluate fire access. And they're going to do a better job of describing what that's about. But essentially, with the new fire code, actually it's called 2015, doesn't sound new, but when they talk about it, they'll mention that there's some more protection for fire access, essentially. So that third condition in the report should read, shall comply, I'll just read it, shall comply with section B 106 multifamily residential developments, shall comply with the remoteness provision. And this is the part that they wanted to add on, or the fire marshal revised his comments to say, and/or third emergency fire apparatus access road to meet the intent of the International Fire Code. So with that, staff is recommending approval subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections as outlined in the report. And I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Sorry, guys, muted. The applicant's here and has a presentation for us.
Yes. Good evening, commissioners. Will Gleason, do you want to swear me in?
I'm going to go ahead and swear.
Sure.
I need to swear you in, yes. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Will Gleason, 7601 Jefferson Drive Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87109.
Thank you.
Give me a moment here and I'll bring up the presentation. All right, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, and fascinating meeting this evening. So very interesting. Our case tonight is a small addition to the approved site development plan for Villa Sendero. It is adding 24 units to the already existing approved 252 units. It's pretty straightforward. So this is the original approved development plan. The site here under construction, I think you are all pretty familiar with where this is. It's off of Beckner Road, right near Cerrillos and right next to the Outlet Mall. So the site's under construction, and our proposed addition is right here in this corner between the interstate and the outlet mall. So, and this is the outline red, this phase 2. And so this actually has another part to it, and that is that we are proposing to create a fitness center here, and in the process remove 18 of the units that were approved for that portion of the site, and then build an additional 24 units here. So there's really a net of only 6 units over the entire project. So we have plenty of parking here. We will move the trail just a little bit, and then the trail will continue along the south side here. And otherwise, the project is as was approved in last year. So this is a little blow up of this. It's basically the footprint is of 6 units. It's 3 stories high, same style, same configuration as the rest of the project. And then let me show you a few renderings. So this is looking kind of southeast, just south toward the interstate. The original approved part of the project, and then this is the proposed addition down here. Some of the interior courtyards of the site, parking areas, dog park, pool area, community building, pool deck, and the proposed fitness building here. So, and as far as development considerations, it meets the city's affordable housing criteria. We will be paying a fee in lieu of constructing affordable units. The windows will be acoustically rated, and the project schedule is for completion of the first 2 buildings this summer, and then final completion mid-year next year. So there were 3 basic conditions of approval. The one was about adding bike racks. It was an oversight on our part. We actually had the bike racks on the site plan, but had not called them out. So they will be right here on the site plan. That's pretty straightforward. There was a condition about extending a link to the trail. And the existing trail, the diverging diamond trail over here. The challenge with that is that the applicant does not own this land, so it would require the NMDOT to allow that trail to cross their land. We are willing to work with NMDOT, and I do think they might be more amenable to some sort of alignment that might be a little further south here, but again, it's up to NMDOT, not up to the applicant here. So I think we would ask that this not be a condition of approval, as it's something that we're not sure that we can actually get from NMDOT. And then the third one, which is the one that we focus the most on, is this so-called remoteness provision, which I confess was something that I had not heard of. And it's partly because when this plan, original site plan, was reviewed and approved by the city of Santa Fe, it was under the 2005 fire code. And since then, the city's adopted the 2019 code, which has this thing called the remoteness provision. And so it is saying that basically when you have more than 200 units, you need to have a certain distance between your 2 access points to the site. And so it requires a little math. The specific language is that they shall be placed equal to or not less than 1/2 the length of the maximum overall diagonal dimension of the property area to be served. And so let me just show you what that means. So here are the 2 access points that we have to the site now. And these are about 400 feet apart. These are both off of Beckner. And so if you draw a diagonal from here down to the new site here, that's about 1,400 feet. So half that distance would be 700 feet. Well, you don't get 700 feet here. 700 feet is much further over this way or somewhere else on the site. So so the owner has pursued many alternatives here. The most obvious one is to actually connect to the parking lot of the mall here. He has really tried to contact the owners of the mall, going to the office in Dallas, offering substantial compensation for this access, and it's just for fire access, but he has gotten no response from them. So there's a couple of other potential solutions here. One is to that he does have control of this easement along here. So we could actually create a point for access along here. The challenge is that he does not have any control over the access to the roundabout over here. So that would require negotiations with the property owner here, which is Presbyterian. There's a possibility, but there's no guarantees that Presbyterian will allow this cross access agreement. So that's one solution. The other is to create a third point of access along this P&M easement along this side of the property, and that is something that is within his power to do, within our power to do. So those are the options here as far as the remoteness provision goes. I'd also say that the project was approved under the prior provision, and this is a fairly minor addition to this project. It's less than 10%, and I would offer the suggestion of saying that the commission waive this provision for the remoteness, for complying with this remoteness provision. So those are the ideas on the table, and that is pretty much our presentation here tonight. I will stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that would like to testify on this case? Anybody from the public? Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Satenia?
Yeah, I have some questions. I'm trying to understand the elevation of the new development as compared to the existing development. Do you have any site sections that take into account the freeway or maybe even the outlet mall, in terms of how these positions, how this new development, these three-story buildings that are sitting right next to the freeway are going to impact the horizon line? Or
Commissioner Satenia, members of the commission, I do not believe that I have any renderings that illustrate that. The topography is fairly level there. I know that Mr. Teakin is on the line. I'm not sure if he could weigh in on that, but if you look at this, and I don't know if we can pull that up again, but we had that rendering that showed that perspective of that addition in relation to the mall. It will be visible from I-25 for sure. I'm not sure whether your concern is the view from the mall toward I-25 or the impact on the I-25 viewscape.
I-25 viewscape is what I'm trying to understand. Would you say that the elevation of the building compared to where the other apartments are going to be is significantly lower? Can you speak to that, or higher?
Commissioner Satania and members of the commission, I believe that it is approximately the same, and I'm looking at it on my screen, and I would venture to say that it is pretty comparable to the elevations of the existing approved development in terms of its impact.
Would you say comparable? Because when I'm looking at the elevation lines, it seems like that this building might be, the existing development sits farther down below, and maybe that's just a retention pond, or there where the road connects into this new development, but it seems like it's significantly lower than this little corner piece that we're looking at.
It's not and I apologize that I can't pull up the image, but from looking at my perspective on this, it does not look to be significantly different from it.
Mr. Gleason, you don't have a topography slide that you can pull up? Maybe Mr. Tanya can dissect it.
I'm looking. If you give me a moment, I might be able to pull one up.
And Mr. Chair, can I just say something also real quick? Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to kind of just outline for the commission kind of the authority. And I'm sorry for Mr. Gleason. The confusion relies here. The commission cannot waive the International Fire Code. That's adopted by the city. The only person who can waive any provisions of the International Fire Code is actually the fire chief. And they have the authority. So I'm sorry, Mr. Gleason, if you were confused about the direction, but you can't actually ask the commission to waive those conditions. You can either accept them as the fire marshal has presented them and then contest them later, or we can postpone the application until such a point that you have finalized this with the fire marshal. And the fire marshal is here. Mr. Griego is here to answer any questions, but I have had experience in the past with provisions of the International Fire Code and applicants not being able to satisfy those conditions. And the fire section of the city code, I believe, says that the fire chief is the person who can remedy those situations.
Thank you for that.
And I members of the commission, I completely understand that, and you can disregard that remark. We're working hard with the fire marshal to resolve this and come to a solution that works with the provision.
Mr. Burke, it looks like Mr. Cornelius has his hand up. Is he part of their team, Santa Fe Engineering?
Mr. Gleason, is Eric Cornelius part of your team?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and promote Mr. Cornelius. And I'm going to try to promote Mark as well. All right, they've both been promoted. If they'd like to speak, they'll have to be sworn in.
Mr. Cornelius, did you want to answer Commissioner Satenia's question?
Yes, I can go ahead and speak regarding the elevations relative to the interstate.
Okay, let me go ahead and swear you. I'm going to swear you in. You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Eric Cornelius, 1599 South St. Francis Drive, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505. So in answer to the question regarding the building heights, I-25 is in a bit of a fill area. I-25 sits just south of this property here, and I-25 is roughly about 8 to 10 feet higher than the portion of the property that we are developing. The existing buildings that are already approved are sitting within 1 to 3 feet. The finished floor elevation is within 1 to 3 feet of this new proposed building. So relative to the interstate streetscape, the floor elevations will be comparable to the others that are already approved, and they will sit lower than the interstate elevation. These are 3-story buildings, so yes, the tops will stand up, but it won't be much different than what's already been approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Satania, you have the floor still.
Yeah, I think that answers my question. I just wanted to check and make sure, because we don't have those sections available to us. So, okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody wants to testify? I haven't closed it. I'm going to close it after Commissioner Garcia. So put your hand up if you do. Commissioner Garcia, please.
My question is just more to back to the applicant and maybe also taking a little bit more of Commissioner Satania's concerns. It just seems to me that it's kind of awkward to the corner there, and it really seems like it's going to block a lot of view coming off I-25 if you're going south. We already have 3-story buildings on the phase 1 that were approved, and this other little corner just looks kind of awkward to me. Looks like you're trying to get some extra space in there and just redevelop the program, the whole plan. I'll stand down for a few minutes and then see if any other commissioners have any concerns about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing nobody raising their hand, I'm going to close the public hearing part of this. And Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually wanted to ask a question about what was said about the condition regarding the trail connection. As I understand it from Mr. Gleason, he's saying that although that's listed here as a condition of approval, that's not something that they can complete because it's not their land. And I don't know if there's anyone from the MPO here or if perhaps land use staff could help explain that a bit more about what might be expected in that case, so I can understand that.
Chair, Commissioners, Commissioner Lawrence, thank you for the question. So we had invited MPO to participate in this meeting, and I am actually surprised that they're not here, but we had sent them a link earlier in the week. So I will work on getting MPO here. I can't answer that question definitively for the MPO. I don't want to answer it incorrectly for the commission. I will text one of them to see if they can jump on this meeting very quickly.
Thank you. And Mr. Burke, maybe you can explain, so I have a better understanding, in case we don't reach them, what happens if this is included as a condition that is that turns out to be impossible?
Yes, I can speak to that. So the MPO is going after their master trails, and essentially that's okay if this connection isn't made. At some point in the future, at least if the applicant agrees to designate an easement through their property for a future bike lane extension, then we will be able to, at such time that the property next to them is developed, we would be able to finish that connection. So at least if the applicant is agreeable to at least reserve on a plat that space, then at such time a future connection is able to be made, then we would pursue that, just much like we try to pursue trail easements throughout the city by just getting easements through properties.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. And then I would like to, if I could be clear, Mr. Gleason, if you would be amenable to that, given how it may or may not actually play out. Are you amenable to this as a condition in that case?
Commissioner Lawrence, members of the commission, I believe that the owner is here, Mark Teakin, and I would let him answer that, but I believe that he would be amenable to that.
Thank you.
And if we could just swear Mr. Teakin in, he's ready to answer.
Okay. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Mark Teakin, 2600 Dallas Parkway, Frisco, Texas, 75034.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Commissioner Lawrence, thanks for asking about that. But yeah, we'd be happy to provide easements for future planning for that trail connection, assuming that other NMDOT would ever sell us their land or somebody else their land or allow it to be developed. We've talked to them a couple times, and apparently they're holding that property right now for future construction staging for other highway projects. But happy to comply with that, and also more than happy to comply just on the fire access issue. More than happy to comply with the intent and the code, whether that be through a third exit or some sort of deal with Presbyterian Hospital. So we're happy to do both of those.
Thank you, Mr. Teakin. And Mr. Chair, I have no other questions at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Any other commissioners' questions? Commissioner Garcia.
Back again, the whole idea in regards to doing the second phase was to add, was it a community room or a weight room? Was that the intent of this?
Fitness room.
Fitness room. Okay, and so removing the units that were going to occupy the fitness room, therefore we were going to add this additional piece to make the units. Is that correct?
And Will, if you don't mind, if I might speak
Sure.
to this. So the really the reason for this amendment is when we originally designed this project, it was designed with a parking ratio of I think 1.46 stalls per unit, which exceeded, actually, I think we were over parked by a stall or two per the code requirements. We are not merchant builders, so we don't build and sell. We hold long-term and operate and try and run nice, good, clean communities and keep them. The first thing that seems to become a problem is parking, and it's a very hard problem to fix. So once you have a parking problem, you can only go so far with replacing landscape buffer. So the strategy here was to buy an adjoining parcel and basically relocate the 18 units. We did add 6 units, but we were able to pick up parking. And so we're now parked like 173 stalls per unit, which does exceed code. But we also think it's going to be, we believe that everybody that's going to live here is going to have a car. So we think it's going to be needed. In doing that, we also felt like we made the community building a little bit too small. So relocating the gym that was originally proposed to be inside the community building and repurposing that space made a lot of sense. So ultimately, because we're not merchant builders and we are building to hold and operate, we're more concerned and focused on resident experience, and we want the property to function long-term well. So that was, I hope that gives a little bit more color on why we tried to expand.
Thank you, Mr. Teakin. And so, there again, I just trying to understand the whole reasoning behind adding this additional portion, and there seems to be, some issues with it in regards to the fire provision and all that. I think you guys will work that out. I know it doesn't fall in any of the overlays, corridors or links of that sort, so building height really isn't going to be a factor. I do feel, just comment that it's going to be somewhat tall for the area, especially just protruding over to where the outlet mall is. And if that's not of anyone's concern, then I guess we'll move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia.
And Chair,
Back to Commissioner Lawrence. I see that Eric's here.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to point out that Eric Ong is from the MPO is here.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, is it okay if I ask him for a bit more clarification and explanation?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us, Eric. I was just seeking a bit more explanation of the condition in the conditions of approval for this project about connecting the trail to the diverging diamond trail, as the applicant had said that this would have to cross NMDOT property and not be able to be done directly from their property. And I was hoping you could just explain a little bit more about how this condition came to be and what the intent was.
Yeah, sure. So what we looked at is the proximity of the diversion diamond connecting trail, if you want to call it that, as it relates to this property. And we thought it would be a benefit for pretty much everyone to have that connection to that property. I'm sorry, to that trail, but are they saying that the DOT right of way? I'm a little confused.
Perhaps someone else can clarify better than me, but my understanding is that they could perhaps have a starter easement from their property, but the connection to the diverging diamond trail would not be on their property. It would be on DOT property. And
That's correct. Commissioner, if I could just add to that. Eric, this is Gleason. The property to the I guess that's to the south of the site is NMDOT surplus land. So, and Mark Teakin's been trying to acquire that land, but NMDOT has been wanting to hold on to that for other purposes. So we'd love to have that trail connection. It's just a matter of getting NMDOT to agree to that.
Understood. And to the extent that that would be practicable, that would be our recommendation. But if it's not, we understand.
Great.
Thank you for being here, Eric. That was all that I needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Commissioner Satenia.
Yeah, sorry, this is coming. I want to come back to this point about elevation. And Eric, I think, is the one that was speaking on behalf of the elevation for the project. Is he still available? Santa Fe
Yes,
engineer?
Mr. Cornelius.
Yes.
Yes, I'm still here. Yes.
Yeah. So again, I guess my question for you is I'm looking at in our packet, page 185. What sheet of the this is LP sheet number LP00. It appears that the elevation of this project that was previous phase one of the development that was approved is at a higher elevation than the Santa Fe Place Mall. Is that correct?
The Santa Fe Place Mall.
Or the outlet mall. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The outlet mall.
Yes. Everything on this site is higher than the outlet mall. The outlet mall is built. They really cut that whole site down quite a bit. So along the outlet mall, along its southern and eastern border, they cut into the existing ground anywhere from starting at 0 feet at the north side, and then it goes up to about 8 feet as we hit our southern property line. So everything is in a hole already.
Yeah, I got that. So it looks like, just based on if these are 1 foot elevation lines, it looks like this property actually sits 7 to potentially 10 feet higher than the elevation of the Santa Fe Place Mall.
The outlet mall, yes.
I'm sorry, I keep saying the Santa Fe. It's the outlet mall. Yeah, so it said 7 to 10 feet higher than the outlet mall.
Yes, in that location, it does form a pinch point right there at the southeast corner. But what our intent was with this was not to do a massive amount of earthwork on this project. We could have brought it down to the existing mall elevation, and it would have resulted in a substantial amount of earthwork, dirt, increased construction time, and substantial retaining walls. Our goal was to go ahead and work with the existing terrain as much as possible.
Well, yeah, I think that makes sense because it's expensive, right? I think what I would like to share with the commission is that I have serious concerns about putting a 3-story building right here on this corner. I mean, if it was at the same elevation of the Santa Fe Place Mall or the outlet mall, and if you think of when you're coming and driving in from on the freeway, that doesn't necessarily stand out given that elevation. But this is already 10 feet higher, and then we're putting, 3-story buildings right here on the corner. And specifically with what we're looking at tonight, the setbacks from the freeway, while if you look at a site plan, is a pretty big gap. But considering the phase, the first phase of this project, a lot of these buildings, in addition with the parking lot that goes around, creates an additional setback, and on top of the one that's already there that runs along the freeway. And we're basically approving a 3-story building to sit right up against where this freeway wraps around, and the exits go into Cerrillos. So in my opinion, above, being 10 feet above the Santa Fe or the outlet mall is a concern of mine of approving this project, and whether it's it's just a concern. So I don't know with a 3-story building if I could support this project when actually looking at what we're approving here and how that's going to impact the viewscape coming into our city. I don't have any other comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Satenia. Commissioner Garcia, you had your hand up next.
One more maybe comment again, and I'm kind of leaning on the same wavelength as Commissioner Satenia. One of the possible solutions is to reduce, instead of a 3-story building, maybe a 2-story building. I know that's going to reduce units, and or some other design, building designs that could possibly make it look like it's stepped farther back. But I'm also kind of on the same wavelength of Commissioner Centenia. So just a point of discussion. I know we have a couple of other commissioners have your hands raised, and I don't know that I would be also supportive of this if it's going to be so high. And I do understand the cost and all that, but I'll go ahead and stand down and let Commissioner Clow give her opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Secretary Clow, you have the floor.
Thank you. I guess I'm asking staff. I mean, I don't think there's any grounds for us to say that they can't have a 3rd story. This isn't a view corridor. It's zoned for 3 stories. The setbacks follow the code. So while we might not like it that much, I don't think we have grounds to deny it. And so I'd like to hear from staff.
Chair, Commissioners, I'm happy to answer that question. Thank you for that question, Commissioner Clow. The Planning Commission has the right to impose conditions and density. By right, you have the right up to a certain height. It doesn't mean that you automatically get that height just because you have that right. When stuff comes before the commission should evaluate it against approval criteria that's listed in the development plan section of this. So if the commission felt that 2 stories was more appropriate, there was a highway corridor study that was done. I think we talked about this in 1999 that did identify parcels along the I-25. It was never adopted or formalized into any type of legislation or ordinances. There's bits and pieces of it throughout the general plan. But Again, this came up with our Zia station conversation and whatnot. So, while it is a right to have up to 45 feet, it does not mean the commission needs to grant that. They have it up to that. So you would look at the approval criteria and you would have to correlate that into the approval criteria, how, you felt that this was inappropriate for height. But it is permissible that it can go up to 3 stories. So the commission does have the power to make those decisions.
Well, but we'd have to come up with reasons that would fit into those criteria. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And, my concern is that we did a 3-story on St. Francis and Zia, which is in the view corridor because of affordable housing. So I see this as being even less intrusive than that.
And I do believe this applicant is paying the fee in lieu.
Right, I understand that, but still, there's a need for housing in Santa Fe, and the more housing, hopefully, the more supply of housing, hopefully demand will go down and prices will go down at some point in time. But I'd like to hear on what kind of criteria we could come up with to deny the 3rd story.
Secretary Clow, if we can wait to see if that's where it goes. We'll open the conversation. I just want to put my 2 cents in. I haven't said much. I think that this application probably needs a little more work. I'd like to see the fire absolutely solidified before it goes forward. We haven't heard much about the fire. We heard that it could be done. I know that Mr. Griego's here. But I hate to put him on the hook to try and make it happen right now. So that's just one of my thoughts. And the other thing is that if it looks like it may be going towards a lower elevation, I'd hate to see the application go to a vote where it may get denied as opposed to maybe trying to work it through. With my thoughts said, I'm going to go to Commissioner Setenia. And then Mr. Teakin.
I just want to speak to a couple of Commissioner Claus' points. Yes, we have approved 3-story buildings along the freeway, and I think Noah pointed that out. But what's unique about this property, where we've approved other 3-story buildings, is that along the freeway, there's a significant decline in elevation as you move north along the freeway, where a lot of these buildings sit, lower. And what I want to bring to the attention of the Planning Commission is that at this juncture, where we're looking at the outlet mall, and if it's actually almost at an even. It's only 10 feet, I think, is what Mr. Cornelius stated in terms of the difference between the elevation of the freeway and the elevation of where we're building. That's a significant difference from where we've approved projects in the past. And with regards to the criterion being met, from my perspective, whether criterion number 2, and this might give insight to the developer, is that approving the development plan will not adversely affect the public interest, is what we have to consider. I think impacting the viewscapes coming into our city is within the public interest, and that is of concern here. The second criterion would be criterion number 3, that the use of any associated buildings are compatible with and adaptable to buildings, structures, is which I would point out, and uses of the abutting property and other properties in the vicinity of the premises under consideration. And I would say, giving the associated structures, which include the freeway, and also that you have the Santa Fe's the outlet mall sitting already 10 feet below, that is not a 3-story building, and that this would be towering over it, definitely for me would have us consider criterion 3 and whether that is met in this case. So if that provides any insight for both the applicant and where I'm thinking about in terms of approving or not approving this application.
Thank you, Commissioner Setenia. Mr. Teakin.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Commissioner Satiga. I guess I don't know that we have picked up survey on the, I do want to see if I could share my screen real quick so you can see some of this stuff. Would that be all right?
Yes, please.
So here's a street view. We haven't picked up survey really back behind this mall. So I know we keep talking about a 10-foot grade difference, but the reality is this site that we've already approved, where we have three-story buildings approved all in this area here, the grade of this new site is not much different than what's already been approved, if that makes sense. And I did try and get a little bit closer here, and I'll see if I can't show you. I know we're saying numbers like 10 feet, but I think from, boy, I've walked the site so many times. You can actually see it here. I don't know that it's that drastic. And we could probably do a little bit more homework there, but I think that, to me, your views coming, and I appreciate you sharing your 3 criteria points there. One of them that stood out was the view. So I'm trying to think if we're obviously, if you're northbound, probably not really much impact, right? But if you're southbound, I feel like the majority of these views have already been approved with 3-story. Tell me if I'm wrong. And I'm trying to think, what view here is different? Is there a different view on this new parcel? So I guess that would be, it would also kind of be weird, just strange to have a whole community of 3-story buildings and now we have a 2-story one. It looks disjointed from a development standpoint. But could you, I guess maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more on what view we would be blocking that I guess wasn't already blocked over here, or is there something I'm missing?
Are you done, Mr. Teagan?
See, yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Satenia, would you like to respond?
Sure, I'm assuming he was directing the questions to me. I don't know if providing these images to us is necessarily supporting your case. One of the things that I'm inviting us to consider is setbacks. So yeah, you can have 3-story buildings next to a major, highway corridor, but where we previously have approved 3-story buildings are much further setback from the freeway and where that development is going to be. What you're proposing this evening is right up to this corner of a major entrance into our city. And, as you can see right there, those outlet buildings are not 3 stories. And if you went back to the picture where you're looking up onto that hill, while in the picture it doesn't seem like very much, I'm going by the elevations that are giving on the drawings, which is about a 7 to 10 feet elevation. And you're going to continue to move around, flatten that out, or build that up to where it's going to be about 10 feet higher than that. That's already 1 story higher than arguably, next to the outlet mall. And then you're adding another 3 stories on a major corner of an entryway into our city. So yes, I understand that across the project, you say, 3 stories, how would that be any different? The reason it would be different is setbacks. And we have to consider setbacks when considering height. And again, where they were previously approved, the setbacks on those 3-story buildings are significantly, are more significant than where the position of this building is in a major entryway into our city. So I don't have any other comments. I think I've made my points, but.
Thank you, Commissioner Satenia. Commissioner Garcia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One other just thing to know, I think it was raised, the question that we're adding additional housing. I think there's only, we're just basically displacing some units from the original development plan and bringing them over to the new portion. Adding, I think, what's the net additional units that are being added to this? Mr. Teakin?
Yeah, sorry, I'm raising my hand in case I'm out of it. But so we're adding 6 units. I guess, and I want to stick with your question, but I do want to make sure that I adequately respond while we have the opportunity to the other questions that have been asked. And I'm curious if our civil engineer could speak to number one. I'm trying to remember.
Mr. Teagan, let
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia finish his question, then we'll get back to you.
Commissioner Garcia, I apologize. So yes, adding 6 units net.
That's okay. So, I mean, okay, we're getting an additional 6 units. And again, to me is the benefit of adding the additional 6 units on this site. Is it going to be, is the benefit of that outweigh the visual, the height, the elevation, the concerns that Commissioner Satania has also raised, and mine as well. And so I'm not too sure about that. And so that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Any other commissioners with input? Commissioner Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to express my view and my comment that I don't feel like 3 floors generally, that 3 stories is unreasonable. I don't feel like it is necessarily unreasonable in this context as part of a larger development that is designed to add more housing, which we desperately need, is already in a mixed use area that is surrounded by, as Commissioner Satania said, right next to it, the outlet mall, which is lower, but other mixed use development as well. I think that we need to consider, as we see more and more slightly larger projects, that we have to be open to a little bit of height in order to try and make housing that try to support housing that conserves water, that is reasonably affordable, and lets more people live here. And I think that this is part of that generally. And so I am supportive of this because I think it is part of that larger picture of what we need to support in this community in terms of slightly higher housing. Mr. Chair, that was all that I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Mr. Teagan, you wanted to respond earlier?
I appreciate the opportunity and thank you for the comments, Commissioner. I guess I did want to point out, and hope I didn't misspeak. Ultimately, the reason that we're trying to relocate 18 of the existing units that would have been built on site and add the 6 units over to this 1 acre parcel is ultimately a parking concern. So I think the first thing that happens when residents come home from work, if they can't find a parking stall, they're upset, they're frustrated. I do believe that everybody that lives at this community is going to have a car. And so if we weren't able to get this approved, they think that although we're only adding 6 net units, we would be forced to take 18 units out of the existing project because we just don't think it's good. We don't think it makes good sense to build it underparked. It's just so hard to fix that once you do it. And it's an operational thing that we're seeing throughout our portfolio. So anyway, I just wanted to add that, but appreciate the opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Secretary Clow.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize what Commissioner Lawrence was also saying and point out in terms of consistency in relationship to the Zia station, which is in a view corridor, which is in the only 3-story buildings in the whole area. In the photographs that we just saw, I think that's Presbyterian Hospital that we can see back there. That's 3 stories. And I think we need to appreciate the presentations that we had in terms of affordable housing, that we need to see more density, that we need to see more height. And again, this is a mixed use area, and I think we need more housing. So I'm in favor of the amendment.
Thank you. Where do you go? Commissioner Satenya, is motion, or you?
No, I have a question. Something just came up. I don't see a signage plan, and I don't remember if it was mentioned. If it was mentioned that one would be provided, but is there going to be any signage that is going to be put on this building?
So I'll answer that. If that's no. Other than the building addresses, there would be no new project signage proposed with this addition.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That answers my question. So the last point I want to make is I think that Commissioner Lawrence, Commissioner Clow, Mr. 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 Clow, Mr.
Commissioner Satenya, you're stuck. I don't know if you can hear me. Go ahead.
Mr. Clow, Mr. Clow, Mr. Clow, Mr. Clow, Mr.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I just downloaded a new OS of my computer, and it is like, did you hear me on repeat?
Yeah, yes. Commissioner Kyle.
Sounded like.
Oh man, I'm sure that was funny. Okay. I put you in my AirPods. Apparently that works better. What I would like to say is I agree with Commissioner Lawrence and Commissioner Clow with regards to affordable housing and height increases. That's not what I'm pointing out here. What I'm trying to point out is, and what one could appreciate is architectural design within our city and how buildings are designed. So this, refusing to deny this application based on the height of the building is not about, we need to be building lower or higher, or that we need affordable housing or not. The applicant's not even putting units on the ground. This is a fee in lieu. What I'm saying is that when you're driving into Santa Fe, if you take a look at the elevation, that we should not sacrifice our viewscapes within our city by a building that's not only 10 feet higher than the current elevation of the outlet mall, but then you're putting another potential 36 or 40 feet on top of that. And again, what needs to be taken in consideration is the setbacks. Setbacks are important when considering height. And I don't think that, the hospital that's set back, 100 or 200 or 300 yards away from the freeway, that's a different consideration when thinking about height than, you're only 30 feet away from the freeway and you're putting a 3-story building right next to that at a juncture, at a major view into our city. I think that is an important consideration when thinking about height. That's not an argument against height or against affordable housing. That's about protecting our viewscapes within our city. And in my opinion, approving this would be approving a sore thumb that close to the freeway versus it being less of a standout if it was further away or set back further onto the property like their other 3-story buildings. I can't approve this project given the 2 criteria I mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Commissioner Satenya. So I guess it probably looks like it comes down to my thoughts or opinions. I'm going to just put them out there. I agree with Commissioner Satenya and Commissioner Garcia. We've done other projects, and while there was one in particular, and looking back because of the setbacks and not doing things of that nature, I regret the way I voted. Mr. Teakin, I know you've done a lot of work. I hate to see this go south on you. I would love to see if you could try and remedy this somehow, either with lower heights or dirt work or something to that effect, finish the fire and try and obtain enough of an easement for that MPO trail, because that's a major trail there. So that's my thoughts on it. You have your hand raised. Go ahead.
So Chairman Gutierrez, I appreciate that very much. I want to address both the things that you just said. The first one on the fire, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that issue has been solved. We have two ways of meeting and complying with the conditions of approval for this project, meeting the intent of the fire code. And I'm not going to speak for him, but as I understand, the fire marshal agrees. We would either provide a third access point, or what they would like us to do is try and work with Presbyterian Hospital, but again, it's not something that's within our rights. So we would be able to comply with fire with a condition of approval tonight, no matter what. We were trying to be accommodating and agreeable by saying, hey, we'll go talk to Presbyterian and see if they would give future easements, which is, I think, not normally something that, developers usually try and do what's within their rights currently. So we were hopefully trying to be accommodating in that sense, but we can comply with the fire marshal's requirements and to meet the intent of the code with the condition tonight. As for the height, I guess I have a couple of questions, in the sense that there's a number of different heights that have been thrown out there, and they're saying, hey, 36 feet, 40 feet, but I do want to make sure I understand from our side that our buildings are, I think, at the highest, they're 32 feet right now. And I know we're saying, hey, you're 10 feet above the parking lot for the outlet mall. So if the thought was, hey, if you're 10 feet above the outlet mall, then remove a story, right? And you'll now get down to a 20-foot height, say, 10 plus 20. Would you guys be open to approving the development plan amendment tonight if we were to cut the grade of our lot down by, say, at least another 5 feet? And I'm going to ask our civil engineer if we can go more than that, but we've got to be careful about how that, but we're willing to do dirt work if that's what you're concerned about. And I think that for us, we would be willing to look at that if it works with our existing community, and would like to see if our civil engineer might be able to speak to that.
Thank you. Mr. Cornelius, are you prepared to answer that, or do you need a second?
Mark, can you repeat just the last 20 seconds or so? I lost audio while I was getting promoted.
Okay, so I would like to try and address Commissioner Stigna's height concerns. And I would like to see if there's a way to meet what, to try and address that concern. Some of the things he mentioned is, hey, instead of approving a 3-story project, come back and maybe we would approve a 2-story project. So instead of a 3-story building, down to a 2-story. You lose 10 feet, that provides 10 feet of view corridor, and it makes it more appealing. I think it would address the concern, if I understand correctly. My thought is, can we make those 10 feet up in the grade? And if not, how much can we make up? And then also to confirm that we would only do a 32-foot high building, not 40. So we try and make the height, we would lower the height by, number one, lowering the height of the building, number two, lowering the grade elevation of the land. I'm curious if that's possible, Eric.
I mean, everything's possible from an engineering standpoint. We can engineer our way through it. One of the concerns I would have with going that route is it would greatly impact our drainage and our sewer design. My concern with the sewer design is right now it works just fine as a gravity flow system tying into the existing city system. If we were to go ahead and lower this site, it would require the use of a pump. For this new unit. Pumps require more maintenance, more frequent trips from city staff. They use electricity, and they will continue to use electricity from here on until forever. you will always be pumping that effluent uphill unless another gravity solution comes up further on down the road. Another issue is with drainage. With developing this extra 1 acre where it's at, it does give us the opportunity to go ahead and greatly improve the already working drainage system that I had designed on phase 1. It allows us to go ahead and reinforce the drainage on the backside of the outlet mall. If we lower the grade, we will have to consider other alternatives, subterranean drainage, which look great on paper initially, but they do tend to not work as well in the future, will require more maintenance, and it would have to turn into an underground system. My concerns with underground systems is you're never quite sure if they're working properly versus an overland system like we have now. You can visually inspect the pond, city staff can inspect the ponds and verify that they are working appropriately. So
Eric, that's very helpful. I appreciate it. And I think that the grinder pump would steer me less on 24 units than it would on 250. So that's not as much. Let me ask you this, Chairman Gutierrez, if before we were at 10 feet of grade plus an additional 40 feet of building, if we were able to comply with a 32-foot height total by way of grade, Eric, that gives you some room for your storm and your sewer, and by us adjusting building heights, do you think that that would be something you would be able to support?
I'd want to hear more from the fellow commissioners. Mr. Burke, do you have?
Yeah, thank you.
Something to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So I think before we dive too much into kind of the let's make a deal territory, I think what we should look at here is that what's presented in front of us. If the commission chose to go in the way that Mr. Teakin was kind of talking about, that severely affects the current grading and drainage plan, which has been reviewed, which has been recommended for approval. The elevations that have been approved are based off of natural and finished grades. Those would also need to be changed. So if the commission goes that direction, it would be staff suggestion to deny the application and ask them to come back with a better design. That would end a grading plan that reflects what they would be asking for based on the feedback of the commission. I see Sally has her hand too.
Thank you.
Mr. Burke.
I just wanted to add the option of postponement also, as I think the chair alluded to, would be a potential. I think it would be all right to move to postpone, ask the applicant to continue working with staff now that they've had this input from the commission, revise their application and drawings if they want to propose something a little bit different. But I agree it might be problematic to approve with conditions that'll require a huge amendment of the development plan because that will implicate additional review by our team.
And so if we could, if possible, if we could just get some direction on how to revise, we would be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Teagan. Mr. Griego, I see you're here. If I need you, I'll call on you. I see your hands up. But first I'm going to go to Commissioner Sakenya.
Yeah, I'm not recommending that we postpone. I think that it's important that we vote on what's presented this evening and based on the criteria. I think that also provides the applicant an opportunity to go back. And I agree with the comments. I think it's complicated to start to be in a negotiating business where, you know, you're changing elevations and what, to the engineer's point, you're screwing with whatever's been done. I don't think that's feasible this evening. I would say there would have to be significant, you know, the elevation would have to be significantly lowered. And I would be interested, given the location of the proposed site, including site sections that include the freeway, that include the surrounding buildings. And I think that's fair given the criteria that we have to approve this project on. And seeing that in the next presentation, should this come in front of us again.
Any other commissioners? If there's nothing else, I will take a motion. Commissioner Satenya.
Give me one moment. Sorry, give me 1 second, please. Okay. All right. I move to deny the development plan amendment for case number 2021-3804, subject to the required general fine. Well, I'm just going to leave it at that. Move to deny the development plan amendment for case number 2021-3804. I would like to also include for staff and Sally, based on the criteria, criteria number 2 is not met, that approving the development plan will not adversely affect the public interest. I do not believe that it meets this criteria, based on that viewscapes into our city are important, and that this would negatively impact that for our city and the people who live here, and that it does not meet criteria number 3, that the use and any associated buildings are compatible with and adaptable to building structures and uses of the abutting property and other properties in the vicinity of the premises under consideration. I don't believe that it meets this criteria when taking into consideration the viewscapes, the setbacks, and how close they are to the freeway and to the adjacent outlet mall. When considering what we've done and the setbacks that exist for other buildings down the way. So those are the 2 criteria that I do not believe are met, and why.
Commissioner Garcia, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If you'll do a roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Clow,
No.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes, and that's the to deny. And I'd like to explain my vote after everybody's voted, please.
okay. Commissioner Lawrence,
No.
Commissioner Satania,
Yes.
Chair, you have a tie. How do you vote?
Yes,
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
thank you. Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to just giving some supporting comments in regards to affordable housing and units and inventory and how that affects price and I mean, it's really needed in our city. I do, however, feel that alongside with Commissioner Satania that it's placed in the wrong, it's just in the wrong place for height, and we already have a 3-story phase 1 that's approved, and so that was the reason for my my decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. And mine was also the same. The proximity to the highway, the setback, being so much closer than the original development, and the viewscape on the entrance of the highway. Sally, if you need more criteria, let us know, and we can email you, or if you can take them from the minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I think the commission did a good job explaining the basis for the decision and linking it to the legal criteria. So I do appreciate that in the motion and the proposed findings. So I'll work with my replacement and staff to have a draft of the findings in the next packet that should hopefully reflect your decision.
Thank you. Moving on to case, give me a second. So we're going to do all these cases as one, correct?
Chair, Commissioners, it is going to be one package. It is separate cases. There's a general plan amendment, a rezoning application, a development plan, and a preliminary subdivision.
Okay.
So 4 cases will be presented concurrently in a single public hearing and a single presentation by staff and the applicant.
Perfect. I'm going to read in the 4 cases and then we'll turn it over to staff. Case number 2021-3805, Alexander Estates Subdivision General Plan Amendment. Case 2021-3806, Alexander Estates Subdivision Rezoning. Case 2021-3807, Alexander Estates Subdivision Preliminary Development Plan. And case 2021-3808, Alexander Estates Preliminary Subdivision Plat. Ms. Wynant?
Thank you very much. Good evening again. Let's see. My report here. I'm not going to do a shared screen. I'll just do another quick verbal report. And hold on a second here. Just lost my report. Hold on a second here. Okay, so 2021-3805. I don't want to repeat everything you just said, but essentially it's the general plan amendment. This is the first component of this 4-part case. And it's the Montoya Land Use Consulting Agent for the Next Generation Contracting, Inc., who's the owner. Request approval of the general plan future land use amendment to change the designation from low density residential, which is 1 dwelling unit, and there's a piece that's 1 to 3 dwelling units designated. And that would be the request up to moderate density, which is 3 to 7 dwelling units per acre for approximately 8.38 acres of land located on the east side of Kate's Way, north of South Meadows Road. The second case is a rezoning of that same parcel, of course, and that would be from the R1 district to R7 for, and that would be to 7 dwelling units per acre. And the thirdly is the preliminary development plan, and that is for preliminary subdivision for 59 single-family residential lots on approximately 8.38 acres. And finally, again, as was stated, as the preliminary subdivision plat, and that is for the 59 single-family residential lots. There's 8 motions that are laid out there in your packet. And from what was originally, I want to mention, posted on the PrimeGov for people to access, there were some things that were changed on that second page. So of course I had some typos in there, which I wanted to change right away, in terms of references to cases, case numbers. But the one that is probably most critical, I'll just point this out from the get-go here, is it's number 3, condition of approval. Applicant to work with the city to address issues identified by the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So otherwise, everything stands there as the same as probably what you accessed earlier from the city's website. Basically, I'm just going to make this real quick. I mean, we've got some really nice graphics in the report. I did get those from the applicant, which you'll see in her PowerPoint presentation. So this is an ever evolving area, on South Meadows. This is a unique position of this location for this subdivision, because you've got a lot happening there. You've got the El Camino Real to the east, and then you've got Cottonwood Village to the west. But in between too, you have Sangre Azul, which is already approved, immediately to the west across Kate's Way. And then there's a couple of residentially zoned properties north of Sangre Azul that the applicant, I'm sure, will acquaint you with her presentation. But essentially, in our review of this project, it meets Chapter 14 criteria requirements. The lots are range from, I believe it's 4,000 to 6,000 square feet. They meet the setback requirements, for the homes and heights, density. But what's really unique about this is that here you have a piece of land that has access to Kate's Way that takes you real quickly right there to South Meadows. But with this many homes, you have to have another means of egress. So where do you get that? And you back up to the expressway, you can't access the expressway. You have to go all the way to that roundabout, and that's what they're doing for this development. They're putting in a second means of egress, so that Alexander Drive, as it's called on your plans. So that's what's really unique about this development. They worked extensively with the city, state, and school district to get easements in place to make that happen, which quite the undertaking. So essentially, when I went through, when the staff went through to evaluate the project and all these various components, we found that they did meet the criteria. So I won't go into all those, but just to say that the staff believes that this does meet the criteria for each of those components, as you can see, going through the report. So I'm just going to conclude by saying that staff recommends approval subject to the technical corrections, conditions of approval, and you'll hear more about the things that will be done in terms of sidewalk connectivity, and then also one of the criteria, conditions of approval was to do a 10-foot multi-use trail along that Alexander Drive instead of a 5-foot sidewalk. So I think that was a good solution. Staff agreed with it. So basically, we are recommending approval of the development and all of its components. And with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wynant. Ms. Montoya, do you have a presentation for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission and staff.
Monica, I'm going to go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Monica Montoya, 726 Gregory Lane, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Monica Montoya of Montoya Land Use Consulting. I'm a local land use consultant in Santa Fe, and I'm here this evening on behalf of Next Generation Contracting, Inc. Also with me this evening is the project engineer, Orlin Guerrero Ortiz, and Melanie Bishop of Bohannon Houston, who is our traffic consultant on the project. I want to first thank you all and staff for all the hard work that you guys do. I know it's late and I don't want to burden you with too much information. I'll do my very best to keep this short. Just want to say we respectfully request your consideration of our project. I'd like to do just a short PowerPoint presentation of some of the major points of the project. Donna did a great job of giving you all a good overview. And so I will keep it very short if that's all right with you guys. And so with that, I will, hold on, sorry about that. I'm going to share my screen first. So Noah, I'm not finding that. There it is. I'm sorry. Thank you guys. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is Alexander Estate subdivision here before you guys for consideration of approval on the preliminary subdivision and preliminary development plan and recommendation of approval for the zoning and the general plan amendment. Just a brief outline of what I'll be covering with you this evening. I'll go over the project. I'll give you an overview of the project. I'll give you a location of the project. I will go over with you the design of the subdivision, the anticipated architectural design of the subdivision, and then briefly go over the general plan and rezoning criteria with you, and then I'll stand for questions. So the first item, what is Alexander Estates? Alexander Estates is a single-family residential subdivision where 59 lots on 8.4 acres. The subdivision will offer additional inventory to the single-family housing inventory in Santa Fe. It'll offer individual ownership, and the subdivision itself will include quality homes with pride of ownership. The project is located, as Donna mentioned, on the north side of South Meadows Road, off of Kate's Way on the east side of Kate's Way. North of the project is the New Mexico 599 highway. Our project is directly adjacent to that highway. On the south, there is a small vacant property, a privately owned piece of property between us and South Meadows Road. To the east of us is the El Camino Real School. To the west of the project is a combination of vacant and a few homes on vacant land right across to the west from us. You folks will, and then to the west of that even is the Cottonwood Village, which is a high density mobile home park. Beyond the school is the Gearhart Apartments, which is under construction at the moment. And then beyond that is a 30-acre parcel owned by the state of New Mexico, but currently leased by the city of Santa Fe for economic development. And so this is just an image of the screen that I just showed you just a moment ago, just to give you a better picture of what the area looks like, where the property is in relation to some of the existing buildings and infrastructure in the area. Then next I'll go over the subdivision design with you. So what you're looking at right here is just a depiction of the subdivision itself. Here is South Meadows Road. I'm assuming you all can see my pointer. Then to the north of the subdivision is the New Mexico 599, El Camino Real School. To the east boundary, the Sangre Azul subdivision, which Donna mentioned was approved by the Planning Commission in the recent months. Here's that vacant property I was telling you about earlier. You can see there's a few buildings on some of these properties. Then to the west of that is the Cottonwood Mobile Home Park. The lot is very rectangular in shape. There's a mild slope from the north to the south. The subdivision will include a loop, a drive. There'll be an access from Kate's Way north that you can take a right to the subdivision off of Alexander Road. And by the way, Alexander, the name of the subdivision itself is the developer's son. His son's name is Alexander. So this would be Alexander Road that would loop around Kate's Way. Alexander Road will serve as an access to these lots on the east side of it and to the west side of it. And then Kate's Way would be access to these lots along this side here. The second mentioned that one access would be off of Kate's Way to the south. There is a second access point, which we have committed to construct and dedicate to the city of Santa Fe. This is a 52-foot wide road that will include 2 driving lanes, a landscape lane, and as a result of comments we received from the MPO folks, they're pretty busy these days, it seems. A 10-foot wide multi-purpose easement to get folks around, which we agree with. We think it's a good idea. So the road will connect on the northeast part of the subdivision. It's about 2,000 feet long. and it'll connect, it's off the page here, but it'll connect to the future City of Santa Fe Fire Station, and then beyond that to the roundabout right at the New Mexico 599 roundabout. Okay. Lots within the subdivision will meet the standards for the R7 zoning, including stick-built single-family homes. And we propose that the subdivision design complies with the standards of SFCC and is compatible with uses, characters, and densities of the surrounding neighborhood. The R7 zone standards for height, setback, mass, and scale for residential buildings are similar to the neighborhood or to the surrounding neighborhoods. There is a 20% affordable element to this project. So 12 of our homes, 12 of the 59 homes will be constructed and dedicated to the Santa Fe housing program. We'll be making some improvements to the area. The Kate's Way, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be constructing that. It'll have water and sewer that will be accessible to the neighbors on the west side of us. We're making a significant contribution by constructing this road. By the way, the city will have access to this. The city has a lease from the state for 30 acres of land right in here for economic development purposes. So this road, our intent is to dedicate it to the city so that it can be used in their planning efforts for that economic development project, master planning. There are opportunities, well, there's an opportunity, a great opportunity for the residents of the subdivision to be able to access the Santa Fe River Greenway project, which is the city of the county, I believe, I'm sorry, is working, has a planning for a pedestrian access along the Santa Fe River. That's within close proximity to the project. It's across South Meadows. It's a within walking distance for sure. The project will provide easy access to New Mexico 599. It's adjacent to school. It's shopping in the area. It's just an ideal scenario for a residential subdivision. Next, I'll show you what it's going to look like. This is a photograph of an existing residence that was constructed by Next Generation Contracting Inc. in the area. I took a picture of this building to show the commission what the quality of this this home. It's a custom designed home. It's got stucco, it's got recessed windows, custom doors, clay tile roof, and recessed garage and windows, just in a recessed entry space there. I wanted to show you these just to show you what the character of these homes are. There's a lot of wall step backs to create character and shade, and it's just an overall nice structure. This is a picture of a streetscape of one of their subdivisions in the area. As you can see, and we expect this, you can expect nothing less for Alexander Estates. This is, as you can see, it's a nice streetscape. There's some great landscaping, street trees, and just overall nice view, nice to look at. There's varying floor plans. And it's just a nice project. And I'll just briefly go over the general plan amendment proposal. This is a map of your general plan, your future land use plan. And it's intended just to show you what is in the area in terms of anticipated densities by the general plan. The Cottonwood Mobile Home Park has a designation of 7 to 12 dwelling units per acre, although I think it's probably higher than that, but I don't know for sure, I'm just guessing. The public institutional, of course, is just the designation for the high school, or I'm sorry, for the El Camino Real K through 12 elementary and mid school. 12 to 29 is the designation that is assigned to the Gerhardt Apartments. And this is our project right here. It has a 1 to 3 density, anticipated density, and a 1 unit per acre density along the 599 corridor, which basically we believe is an assignment to most of the property that are along the 599. We propose that the project is consistent with the policies of the general plan, and that medium density is appropriate for the site based on density patterns in the area. At present, the project site is designated low density. Low to medium general plan densities exist adjacent to the west and south boundaries, and high densities up to 9, 12, and even as high as 29 are within proximity to the project. We propose that medium density residential will contribute toward a coordinated land use system in the immediate area of New Mexico 599 and South Meadows Road. Many amenities for a healthy community exist or are in the planning stages to promote a prosperous community, including access to an interchange, shopping, and an employment center. Schools, parks, pedestrian trails are in close proximity. I'll take you into the zoning, the rezoning. This is a zoning map taken from city GIS data. As you can see, this light blue area is the subject parcel. Some of the zoning districts in the area include R5, the mobile home park, MHP. There's a mixed use commercial and residential. This purple area here is a mixed use residential and commercial zoning, which I thought was interesting. R3, this parcel in which the city has leased from the state, is an R3 zoning. These brown areas are 21 units to the acre. That's the Gerhardt and the Madera Apartments, which is contemplated for construction soon. The R7 residential district is established by the Santa Fe City Code to allow for a greater intensity of residential land. The R7 is an infill zone for development of vacant land and promotes a compact urban form and efficient use of public infrastructure and services. The existing infrastructure is sufficient for R7 according to our analysis for a medium density project. The area has evolved, as Donna's mentioned, the area has evolved to include much higher densities than R7, including 2 apartment communities. As Donna mentioned, where there have been some conditions from staff, we have reviewed all of the conditions from the development review team, and we agree with them. The MPO, one of the conditions MPO implemented or asked us to implement was the creation of that multi-use trail along that 2,000-foot stretch. And we will coordinate that and implement that into a design. They also, MPO wanted us to incorporate a trail from the south edge. Let me see, I think okay. Let me go back to this very quickly. This is probably the best picture to show it. So the MPO would like us to look into the possibility of extending a sidewalk from the southwest corner of this subdivision to South Meadows Road. So we're going to look into how we might be able to possibly coordinate that. One issue we have, of course, is with this property owner here. We don't own that property. So there's a couple of things we can do. We can possibly work with that property owner, or we can just somehow incorporate that into the existing design of Kate's Way. We'll look into that and come back with a solution to the Planning Commission with the final plat. we accept that as a condition. In terms of the neighborhood response, we did have an early neighborhood notification meeting in the design phase of the project, and we continue to be in contact with the neighbors, and we will continue to be in contact with the neighbors as we go through the process. And with that, I respectfully ask the Planning Commission to consider this project, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Montoya. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that would like to testify on this matter? Anybody from the public that would like to testify on this matter? Please raise your hand. Looks like we're getting a red Tapia in and out, Mr. Burke.
Mr. Tapia, if you'd like to speak, please keep your hand raised. And now I'm going to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself. And then you'll be sworn in and given 2 minutes to speak, Mr. Tapia.
No timer, no, just let him speak.
Mr. Tapia, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You'll need to unmute yourself, sir.
Mr. Tapia, I'm asking to unmute you, so you don't have to click anything. There'll be a little box that pops up that says the host would like to unmute, so go ahead and click that box. Sure, I think Mr. Tapia is having some issues unmuting himself.
Okay. He's been with us all night long, so Mr. Tapia, there's an unmute button somewhere that you're gonna have to find, probably on the bottom right of your screen, right, Noah?
Yes.
And if you can hit the unmute button, we can hear you. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to testify in this case? Mr. Burke, give the phone number out if you have one available, please, for Mr. Tapia if he wants to try and call in if he can't get off mute.
All right. So if you would like to call in, you can dial 1-346-248-7799. That's 1-346-248-7799.
Okay, let's give him a minute to try and unmute or to dial in, and I will turn it over to the commissioners if they have questions. Commissioner Setenia.
I just want to go back to the condition of approval. Can you explain that again? They don't own the property that's right there. And what were the options, Ms. Montoya, that you were speaking about? Can we go over that one more time, please?
Yes. So on the southwest corner, the MPO condition requested condition is that we continue a sidewalk from the southwest corner of the subdivision to South Meadows Road. And so we're looking at a couple of options to be able to do that. We don't own the property between us and South Meadows Road. But we do own the property that is to the west of our existing Kate's Way design. And so that's an approved subdivision already, but we're going to try and look at possibly working with the access to adjust, if you will, some of the lines within the subdivision to the west of Kate's Way as a possible option to widen and accommodate a 5-foot sidewalk. I hope that answered your question.
It does, thank you. And I remember this other project that we approved in the past. This is currently paved, or Kate's Way is currently paved where that development was approved, or is this project going to pave the entire Kate's Way?
The Kate's Way, the paving of Kate's Way was approved with that subdivision.
Okay, that's right. And you're going to continue the paving all the way around and extending this road out?
That's correct. That's correct, Commissioner.
Okay, great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Satenia. Let me give that phone number again, 346-248-7799. 346-248-7799. If you want to try and call in, Mr. Tapia, we will take your public comment. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and commissioners. I just a couple of points of clarification, Ms. Montoya. There will be 2 access points. Is that correct? And you guys will be developing the road that goes along the 599 area all the way to the intersection?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Garcia, that is correct.
And that is going to be a base course road or a paved road or curb and gutter? I mean, just kind of how is that going to be designed?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Garcia, it will be a 52-foot right-of-way. It'll include 2 10-foot asphalt lanes. It'll include an additional 10-foot multi-purpose lane. It'll have curb and gutter. Yes, and that's it.
Thank you. My initial thoughts on this additional inventory in this area was that it's rather high. I know that it's not high density, but it's adding to the already many units that are being put on South Meadows, and so I kind of had some reservations of R7. I thought about maybe saying R5. I do see that I've been on the planning commission long enough to, I think some of the apartments were some of the first ones that we looked at, and the South Meadows and how it's being reconstructed with walking lanes. Those were big concerns of mine. And the school, number one, is it's already a big school. There's a lot of kids that go there, and having the apartments, additional housing that's going to be proposed on both sides of the street, in additional to more housing. I know that I think this question could probably go to Mr. Burke or somebody from the city. The intersection there at Agua Fria and South Meadows, there's a construction plan for that. And can you elaborate a little bit on how that's going to be? Because that poses a big issue with traffic. I know that giving the extra outlet to the 599 area and the road that you're proposing will help with that quite a bit. And so I'm happy to see that. But maybe you can answer that question, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners, and thank you for the question, Commissioner Garcia. That intersection at Agua Fria and South Meadows was, we entered into an impact fee agreement that was imposed by the council when Gerhardt Apartments came through, and they wanted to be rezoned to R21, and that money was allocated for the intersection improvements at that intersection. And as such, they have begun that project, I believe, or will be starting to begin that project. And I do believe it is going to be, I think, a brand new signalized intersection that will be probably widened. I don't know the exact specifics of it, but that is on the list, and it is a priority project. It has been funded and drawings have gone through and has been approved. And I think Orlin may be more familiar with that intersection improvement than I am even. Nope. Okay.
Thank
your question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Burke. I just going back to a couple of thoughts that I have for this area, and obviously it's being developed. I mean, it has a school that's already probably at capacity. It's got a few apartment complexes that are approved, and there's more development that's going to happen. And so that poses a really big issue in terms of traffic and safety and trails, and I think getting a little bit more in depth with walkability there in regards to crosswalks, maybe tunnels. I know we would never do any kind of overpasses, but I don't know how this project specifically talks to those points, especially that go down farther down the road, going north. But those are just some of my comments, and I think that we do need the housing. Other projects that you guys have done have been very, very well designed and implemented. So thank you for that, and I'll stand down for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Mr. Burke, it looks like we have Fred Tapia with his hand back up. Is he unmuted and ready to speak?
Mr. Tapia, did you want to unmute yourself?
Yes. My name is. Hello.
Let me go. Hi, I'm going to go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear
Okay.
under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Okay. My name is Fred Bonifacio Tapia, and I have property on Cates Way, 2626 Cates Way, and west of me is the Cottonwood Trailer Court, and north of me is the 599, and then east is going to be Alexander, the project. And I have a few questions for you, but first of all, as I look at I'm thinking, is this place going to have like a park or a play thing for kids or anything like that? I mean, it's a lot of houses, and another question is, well, okay, you tell.
We would like to know excuse me, I'll need to swear you in as well, please. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Monica Tapia, and I reside at 3303 Avenida del Oro.
Thank you. Go ahead.
We would like to know if Kate's Way would be paved in the event that this development does get approved.
It does.
Okay. Go ahead and keep with your questions, and then we'll pose them to them once you guys are done.
Okay. We would like to know the extent of utilities to be provided in the area, to include the property where my father owns. I think that's going to be it. I think that's going to be all of our questions.
Okay. So Parker Play Place, utilities to property, and pavement on Kate's Way. We will have those answered. Before we move on, is there anybody else from the public that would like to testify on this case? Seeing none, I will turn it over to the commission. If commissioners have questions, if not right now, if you could just answer those few questions from the Tapia family.
Go ahead, Orlin.
With regards to Kate's Way fronting Mr. Tapia's property.
I'll need to swear you in.
Oh, sorry, Melissa.
That's okay. That's okay. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. And I'm Orlin Cadet Ortiz. I'm an engineer with Design Ingenuity. I'm the project engineer. And the office address is 1492 Louisa Street here in Santa Fe. And to answer Mr. Tapia's and Monica Tapia's question, yes, we're going to be paving Kate's Way, putting curb and gutter on both sides and sidewalk on the west side. Oh, I'm sorry, on the east side. So that's the project on our side. We're also going to be putting sewer and water and bringing up dry utilities through that property. So those will all be in the pavement. I might suggest to you that if you are, if you want taps, for water and sewer and even dry, then you might be able to negotiate with the owner to have those installed at the same time so that you don't have to break asphalt to make those connections. On the Jackson project, there was a neighbor who wanted access to wastewater because he was on a septic tank. And the next generation contractors and owners were kind enough to agree to do it, for him also at basically the cost he's doing all the other work. And so it might be best for you to do that. If you are interested in talking to the Matoyas about that, it may be helpful because the utilities will all be there, but you probably want to get your connections made before the pavement is placed. So you don't have to break it and replace it.
Okay. So that was the utilities and then Parker playground.
There is green space planned for the project, but they're primarily for detention ponds. There is no planned park per se, although it would be an area that would be usable for open space and it will be landscaped with trees and shrubs and it'll look pretty. But it won't have playground equipment in it and it will also serve as a detention pond. So I don't necessarily want the kids going in there when it's flooding.
Thank you. I think that answered all three of his questions. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Satenia?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the parking. I think it's important because here we have another example within our city where we have these narrow tracts of land that aren't properly addressed by the general plan or chapter 14. There's no street parking. And as we know on these narrow tracts of land where there's developments, you have packed streets. And while they provided maybe 20, parking spots along in various places, 3 here, 5 there, I just wanted to point that out to reiterate the need for a general plan update. I'm not sure with what our last land use director left us with in his not being a full general plan update. If this will be covered, but I just wanted to raise those concerns. I don't think that it's going to prevent me from voting in favor of this project, but we want to sound the alarm for this being addressed in the future. So that's the only comment that I'd like to make.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Ms. Guerrero Ortiz, do you have something to?
I would just say that the total parking proposed currently is 30 on street parking. So all those numbers add up to a total of 30.
And how many units are there?
There are 59.
59.
So it's a half space per lot, which is the current code requirements.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Saterna, that is in addition to the 2 parking spaces on each parcel. And of course, that's in addition to any of the units that have garage spaces. So there's a potential for 4 parking spaces with a double car garage on a lot.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Garcia?
Just a comment, I guess, in regards to the parking, the street design is going to be fairly narrow. I'm assuming that there's going to just be parking on one side. Is that correct?
Go ahead and answer that if you'd like. The parking, if you look at the development plan, and I wish I could put it up for you, but it has parking that kind of is in one area it's on one side and the other area it's on the other side. So it kind of goes back and forth in the areas of land that we own. And then Sangre Azul also has some parking too. So street parking, that is.
Okay, thank you.
I could be wrong, but I think that Next Generation only builds 2-car garages too. So there's usually 2 spaces in front of the garage and then the 2-car garage.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? If not, I will take a motion. Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion if you're ready for it.
I'm ready.
I did want to perhaps ask Sally, because these are each different cases, does each one need to be a separate motion?
You know, I tend to be a little informal on our procedure, but
Only because they're each a case.
I think you can, my general guidance has been that if you'd like to lump together something that could be as many as 8 motions into 1 motion or 4 motions or 2 motions, I think it's okay if your motion's sufficiently clear, Melissa's record is sufficiently clear, and noting, of course, that other commissioners can have a secondary motion to split the question up into multiple motions if anybody's uncomfortable with the way it's been stated.
Thank you. In that case, I will start by making the first 4 motions within our staff report. I would like to move to recommend approval of the general plan amendment request for case 2021-3805, to recommend approval of the rezoning request for case 2021-3806, to recommend approval of the preliminary development plan for case 2021-3807, and to approve the preliminary subdivision plat subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff.
And
Commissioner
Commissioner
Satini,
Klaus
second.
seconds.
Secretary Klaus, second. Just for clarification, 2021-3807, technical corrections recommended by staff, and the same on 3808, right?
Correct.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. If we can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I will move to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law for cases 2021-3805, 2021-3806, 2021-3807, and 2021-3808.
Commissioner Klaus seconds.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. If we can get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Montoya. That's good, Ed Ortiz. Moving on, I don't have my agenda in front of me, but I think it's staff communications. Let me get there. Are we on staff communications, guys?
That's
Yes.
correct, Chair. Yes.
Okay, Thank you.
So thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Kind of just really two things that I just wanted to go over. One is we were going to have an in-person meeting. We almost got there, but it's not going to happen on the 19th. So on the 19th, it will be a big agenda right now. It's a lot of captions, but when you boil it down, it's kind of like 3 cases, just with a lot of components to them. So just wanted to make you aware of that, as well as then the formal recommendations of what you saw tonight for cannabis will be at that meeting as well. And we hope to make progress on that. So that's one thing. The second thing is this is Sally's last planning commission meeting. And it is really sad, but also
I
really
move to deny.
Yeah. Taking motions for that. I personally have really enjoyed working with Sally. Sally's been great, excellent, probably, easily the best land use attorney or an attorney at the city that I've ever worked with in my 13 years of there. So I'm really going to miss her as part of our team. But I'm also very happy for her with her next adventure. There will be new people, new faces, in addition to, and it won't be Sally at the next meeting. So I did want to put that on the record and thank her.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any other staff communications?
Just 2 other really quick things. I guess one is that I have extended an offer to a senior planner who will be replacing Carlos Gamora's position. Looks like a pretty promising candidate. Hopefully that person will accept the offer once it gets through our HR process, and that will become an official thing. And then the other thing is that John Neunenbell, who you saw tonight, will present one more case to the Planning Commission in September. But John has announced his retirement effective December 3rd. So he's going to stay on with I think he said something to the tune of, in his 20 years of, or 27 or 28 years of being a professional planner, he's processed over 1,500 planning commission cases, which is a lot. And so I commend him for that. And I'm happy for him. He's going to keep Santa Fe his home. So he's going to stay here. And so you may see him around town, but he will be on board. But after September, he won't be presenting in front of Planning Commission. He'll just be handling the day-to-day, and so we'll be filling his position as well. So I just wanted to put those things out, the ever-changing faces of City Hall and whatnot. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr.
And Chair, if I can just chime in and
Matters
thank
from
you
the
all.
commission.
Can I do just one quick update on my end too? I just want to thank all of you for volunteering for the city and doing a great job and teaching me very much, and staff has taught me a lot. It's been really a great time, and I'm going to miss it very much. I think that you're going to be very happy with your temporary coverage. We actually have our prosecutor from municipal court, Kyle Hibner, is going to be covering this commission meetings for at least August 19th. And he's here tonight. I don't know if he wants to talk. I unmuted him. He's been hanging out in the shadows, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but he will be here on August 19th. He's been watching tonight. He's been asking me great questions by text. So I know he's really paying attention. He's already helping review findings for the next meeting. So he's getting familiar with Lee Logston's Los Solares case already. So I think that's going to go well. And meanwhile, we have actually started interviewing some attorneys. I got to sit in on interview panels. I think we've got one offer out there with hopefully somebody starting maybe the week after I leave, and hopefully a second person starting soon thereafter. Our office has actually had a vacancy since February of 2020. So we've all been covering more than seems reasonable throughout the pandemic. So I'm hoping that the extra staffing will help make up for the kind of learning curve that comes. And I hope you'll all be very nice and helpful to those who follow me as you were for me. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director, anything? You good? You good? All right.
Yeah,
Matters
thank you,
from the-
Sally, for, I mean, if I'm going to chime in, I'd just like to sincerely thank Sally for your service. It's been an honor to work with you for sure. Sally was actually on my interview panel. So I've known her from day one in land use. So thank you, Sally.
Nice, thank you. Matters from the commission? No?
I just want to say on behalf of the planning commissioner, Sally, you will be missed. I personally have a lot of respect for you. And I know I've mentioned that to you already, but I'd like to have it be on the record that the Supreme Court, I believe, is getting a good hand. So best of luck to you.
Yes, if it wasn't for you, Sally would still be working on Zia Station. So that was my first case, and you got me through it. Thank you so much. I think we did an excellent job. I've sat through a lot of attorneys on this board, and you have done an excellent job by far. So we are going to be sorely missed. And best wishes on your new endeavor. Subcommittee members, thank you so much. I know it's trial by fire. We thought you guys were going to start doing affordable housing, long-range planning, something to that effect. And you landed up with this, so I want to thank you. Everything that was put before us tonight was well thought out. And I know you've been working hard on it, so thank you. With that, anybody else? We're adjourned. Have a good night. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.